Good evening. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Right, first I... You're going to read that again? Oh, where's the preamble? Okay, first item, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Stuart Munro and Adrian Mather, and Ian Pittock is here as a substitute chair.
Thank you. Okay, so minutes of the previous meeting from the 12th of June. Is everyone happy with the minutes? Would someone like to propose them? Chris? Someone like second? Catherine? Oh, sorry, Pauline.
It's halfway down. Yeah. It's a vote.
Okay, so to vote, everyone's happy with the minutes, those who are there. Okay.
Abstention.
Yeah. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, passed. Okay, declarations of interest. Anyone got any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Public question time.
There were no public and no member questions, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, item 18 is a presentation from the Leader of the Council, Stephen Conway.
Thank you very much, Al, and thank you very much for inviting me, members of the committee, to give you an update. What I'm going to present to you, you've actually seen already, so in some senses, what I'm going to say as an introduction is a bit superfluous, but just to give you a quick overview of what's to come, I'm going to start with I look at some of the challenges that the council currently faces and the ways in which it's seeking to tackle them. I'm then going to focus on one area of particular attention, which is the community vision, and talk a little bit about that. I'm then going to more briefly tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do in terms of SEND provision as an example of the commitment of the council, which I'm sure is shared across the council, to use the limited resources we have to help those who are most in need. And then I'm going to give you a very few examples of the activities we've been undertaking over the last 7 months, and then finish up with just some observations on next steps. So that's the structure of what's to come. And the first part is really an update on the challenges. I think all of these will be pretty familiar to you. We have, as it says here, an unprecedented financial position. It's certainly the nature of the challenge, the extent of the challenge. I don't think anyone would wish to doubt. We have continuing and stubborn inflation. We have rising demand for our services, particularly in the crucial areas of adult social care and children's services. We have rising interest rates, which makes our borrowing more expensive to service. And of course, as we all know, we are also the worst funded unitary council in England. So we have, in common with all councils, enormous pressures on us, pressures that are causing many to buckle and fall. And we've got the added challenge of the lowest level of central government core funding. Just to remind you, last year we got £1.8 million. We reckon that inflation alone cost us more than 11 million. So that gives you a good sense, I think, of the scale of the challenge. We've also got to, of course, deliver on some of the challenging savings targets we set ourselves last year. So there are some really big challenges here for the council in terms of our financial position. Those challenges, I think, would exist whoever was running the council. And I think we can all recognise that we need to work together to try and solve these. We are looking in joint executive and CLT sessions to keep exploring options on the council finances front. And we're trying to work through the implications of some necessarily difficult budget decisions and savings. What we're feeling, of course, in terms of the pain of the current financial situation is felt by many people in the borough in their own households. And that adds, in a sense, to the council's problem because many people are struggling. The cost of living crisis is hitting many people, even here in relatively well-off Wokingham. There are many people who are struggling, and there are some people who are more than struggling. They're really going under. So addressing the cost of living crisis, trying to help those who are most acutely affected by it, is really an important priority for the council. As you know, we've been developing a tackling poverty action plan. We've been working closely with our voluntary and charitable sector partners in the Hardship Alliance. We are part of that Hardship Alliance. It's not a separate organisation that we work with. We are integral to it. And it's a good model of the kind of partnership working which we seek to develop more broadly, which is the council working alongside others to try and tackle problems of common concern and work together to pool resources, human, financial, and material, and data and information, so that we can reach as many people as we can and maximise our clout in really difficult financial circumstances. I want to come back to this whole idea of partnership working a little later in connection with the community vision. We're also have attached enormous importance to the cost of living crisis in the sense that a team of assistant directors is working very hard on trying to ensure we coordinate our activities to try and maximise our help. As I said, partnerships are an important feature of the way we want to proceed. We have to work with others, partly because we're in cash-strapped times, and partly, I think, because we have to face the fact that cash-strapped times are likely to be the norm for local government for the foreseeable future, perhaps forever. And we do need to think of new models and new ways of working. We need to retain democratic accountability, so it's important that we don't just hive off responsibilities to others, but we work in partnership with others, because where public money is concerned, there must be public accountability. So it is important that we develop a model that works for Wokingham. Other councils have gone down the partnership route. They've adopted a rather different approach. They've simply given large slugs of money to partner organisations and told them to take responsibility for an area. We're not going to go down that route. We believe it's important that the council remains a stakeholder in all of the spending of the money that the council has. So we will be trying to ensure a kind of partnership that really ensures we can continue with democratic accountability. We started with some really good partnerships already in place that we want to build on and develop, but I think it won't come as any great shock to anyone that some of the partnerships or potential partnerships we wanted to see develop were in a fragile state. And that's particularly the case, I think, with our town and parish councils. We were on pretty rocky ground, and there was a lack of trust and a lack of confidence. I can't pretend that we've overcome those problems, but we are starting the process, I think, of overcoming them. It's going to take a lot of work. Real and effective partnership working requires a lot of investment of time and effort. It also requires the identification of mutual benefits, or benefits that both parties are going to get out of the relationship. And that is part of the task. But the rewards, if we can get this right, in my view, are enormous, literally enormous. They will enable us to do things and reach parts of the community we can't reach at the moment. We've got listed there some of the partnerships that we're trying to develop. Educational providers, town and parish councils, voluntary and community sectors. That merely scratches the surface. One of the important new strategic partners that we're trying to develop a relationship with now is the university. University of Reading has enormous potential, I think, in terms of helping us in climate change work, in educational collaborations, and even in some of the work we're doing in places like Gorse Ride in terms of design and ensuring maximum zero carbon or maximum carbon efficiency within any new builds. For the university, for us, the gain of that relationship is clear, but for the university, there is a gain too, because universities nowadays need to prove impact and social or rather community engagement and community benefit from their activities. Their funding depends upon this. So this is not a warm and cuddly, misty-eyed relationship. It's based on hard-headed interest. The university has an interest in working with us. We have an interest in working with them. We have also, and this is obviously in the mix here, but I don't think compares with the issues I've just discussed, the opportunity to try and address some of the governance challenges we've faced. I think I'm not a regular attender of these committee meetings, and I'm sure they've been very effective over the last year, but there is clearly some work to do to try and improve the overview part, if you like, of overview and scrutiny. Perhaps a lot of attention, the balance of attention is scrutinising decisions made, which is a completely legitimate function and important. But I would like to see, personally, much more involvement of overview and scrutiny in the development of policy, rather than simply there having the opportunity to call in executive decisions or comment, usually unfavourably, on things the executive had been doing. I would like to see and find ways of developing a really effective overview side of the operation for overview and scrutiny, so you're actively involved in the helping to formulate policies. In some ways, this would enable us to recover some of the benefits of the old committee system, where councillors built up expertise and experience, worked together collaboratively across political boundaries to try and influence the way policy developed. Oppositions didn't always get what they wanted, but they had an input and they had a chance to make a difference before things were set in stone. So I'd like to see whether we can recover some of those benefits of the old committee system under this new, well, it's not so new now, it's been operating for more than 20 years, but this overview and scrutiny, by my standards it's new, overview and scrutiny structure. I want to take you on to the community vision work we've been doing. This, as I'm sure you're very well aware, is about trying to create a jointly authored community vision which will help shape the priorities for the council in its own strategies and plans over the coming years. So it's trying to build up a bottom-up approach to how the council operates. Before I take you through the process in which we've been engaged in a bit more detail, I just wanted to again reinforce the point that the work on the community vision is, in my view, a good in itself. It helps us better to understand and implement the ambitions and the aspirations of our communities. But it also has the enormous collateral advantage of developing relationships with partners that will hold us in good stead over and beyond the purposes of the vision. So that partnership working I was referring to earlier on is going to be facilitated by the community vision and the work going on to produce the community vision, because we're already engaging with multiple stakeholders. And that engagement is enabling us to see new opportunities for cooperation and working together in areas we hadn't even imagined when we started. So there's more to the community vision than some perhaps people feel that it's all pie in the sky, it's all a lovely idea, but what is it in practice? It is already producing tangible benefits in terms of forging partnerships, giving us access to money and ideas and people that we've never really been able to have before. So the vision itself, we started work on this with a series of plenary sessions and workshops starting in January. Those went on till March. Pauline came to some of those. She will have seen the palpable enthusiasm of the people who were there. And we had really over 150 attendees, different attendees across the workshops. And there was a wide range of stakeholders represented, not just town and parish councils and the voluntary and charitable sector, but healthcare providers, educators, including the University of Reading, which has been a key player. The Vice Chancellor himself has been engaged in this, so he takes it very seriously. The Youth Council, Pauline will remember a session we had with the Youth Council, as will Andy, I think, last year, in which they put us all through our paces and demonstrated how interested young people are in politics and being engaged with, and their ideas being taken seriously. So these are the kind of themes that were identified during the workshop session. So these are identified not by us as a council, but by the people we were working with. The importance they attach to health and well-being, equality, inclusion, opportunity, the environment and sustainability, community engagement, action and empowerment, engaging with young people, which of course is vitally important, given that this is a vision for the future. It's young people who are at the heart of it, and engaging with business. The way the vision sessions worked was facilitated by a public engagement firm called New Local, and who did an extremely good job. They demonstrated, they first got people to think about what the existing strengths of the borough were, and in terms of what was going well. Then they got them to think about where there were opportunities to do things better. And as you can see in this table on, I'm not sure where we've got to, we're on the next slide, Sally, if you can move, or Neil, if you can move that on. Oh, it's only first box has appeared, but not all three. We need all three, I think. Yeah, we're on that's it, thank you. And that last box, we asked people really to think about the one thing they thought would be valuable to come out of the vision, and these were the views that were expressed. So that work's ongoing. We've had a preliminary meeting of a volunteer steering group. There's an internal steering group of officers. There's an external steering group of our partners. I'm on that steering group. Pauline has joined that steering group. And that, I have to say, is really important. I think all of our partners want a little bit of assurance that whatever happens in the politics of the council, there'll be some continuity and some continuing commitment to this. And I hope that will be the case. The work, as I say, is ongoing. We've had our first meeting of the steering group. The second one is coming up later this month. And we will be moving forward apace from that point onwards. I'm happy to come back to that in questions, but I think we should say a little bit about another area where we've been trying particularly to focus attention on helping those who have acute difficulties. That's young people with educational challenges, special educational needs, and disabled children and young people. You will know that we've had success in bidding to government for 2 new SEND schools, which will greatly increase our provision. Now, this will not only be immensely valuable for the families who have SEND children and those SEND children themselves having local provision, but it's immensely valuable to the council because it will mean that we are able to save money in the future on our already enormously high home to school transport bill. Controlling that bill is incredibly difficult because you just don't know who's going to present as in need. Anticipating that need is next to impossible. But the more of it we can cater for locally, the less liability we have to home to school transport costs. Graham could talk to you a bit about safety valve if he really wants to talk about safety valve. That's quite an important part of our project.
Yeah, I won't say many words other than in terms of areas to understand and learn and expand upon. I think this is a really rich source of information here, and I'm happy to take questions, but I'll let Stephen continue through his presentation.
Thanks, Graham. The having an impact slide, which is the next one on from this, Neil. Sorry, I'm moving it to greater pace. You can't take the notes and move the slides on. I'm not going to dwell on this. You can read it all for yourself. You probably already have read it. It gives you a flavour of some of the things we've been doing, and dare I say, some of the achievements over the last few months. And there are some really important things to note there. If I may just pause just to focus on one of them, the award of 3.1 billion to help purchase 17 new homes for Ukrainian refugees. And one of the enormous advantages of that is not only does it provide help for the refugees who most clearly need that help now urgently, but it also adds to our HRA housing stock. This will become housing available when eventually, whatever time that is, Ukrainian visitors decide to move on, either to settle somewhere else in their own homes or move somewhere else. Those homes will become available for general use and will help to reduce housing waiting lists. So that's a really valuable sum of money given to us. We've had to put in money of our own as well, but it's a big and useful investment that will bear dividends in the future. I don't want to particularly dwell on any of the other things listed there, but I'm obviously happy to answer any questions if anybody does want to pick up on any things. I just really want to now finally move on to a few observations regarding next steps. And I suppose the obvious backdrop to all of this is the imperative need to put securing a safe budget and securing our financial position, not just now, but in future years, that has to be front and centre of all we do. You'll recall, I think some of you have been on the council for a while, a phrase that was used regularly by John Kaiser, a broke council is no good to anyone, and that we are very well aware of. It's vitally important to take decisions that ensure that our future financial stability is ensured. That will involve tough decisions. It already has involved tough decisions we would rather not have made in order to secure savings in those areas that have less significant impact on people's lives, so that we're able to focus our attention on helping those where it's imperative to continue spending in order to ensure the quality of people's lives who are in great difficulties, for whom life is a struggle. So this is our twin objective, to secure the savings we need to ensure that council's finances are safe and secure, but to also ensure that we are able to continue delivering for those who most need support. We're going to be, of course, moving forward with our community vision, and that's, as it says here, going to be through process of co-production and community engagement. This will be a genuinely co-authored vision, not a council vision, but a community vision. And we're going to, both as a collateral benefit of that work on the vision, but also separately from it, continue to develop working with external partners, developing our relationships with town and parish councils, developing our relationship with the voluntary and charitable sector, developing our relationship with business, developing our relationship with the emergency services, developing our relationship with educators at all levels. And a special focus of mine is going to be developing our relationship with the university. So that gives you a flavour of what we're trying to do. I'm reminded when I look at this next steps, which sets out a kind of clear direction of travel, that politics is often about events you don't know about, you can't predict. So things will happen that will require a reaction from us. And in some senses, all plans have to be adapted at first contact with the enemy. And the enemy here is, I think, just not knowing exactly what's going to hit us. But this is the way we're trying to move the council forward. And I'll do my best to answer any questions. If they're of an operational or detailed level, they're probably going to have to be handled by Graham rather than me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I think for the benefit of people online, I probably didn't introduce everyone properly, so I'll just to make clear that Stephen Conway is the leader of the council, and we have Graham Ebers here, who's the deputy chief executive. So right, we'd like to open the floor to questions. Okay, start with Andrew then. That's right.
Caroline and then Andy.
Okay, Caroline then first. Right.
Is about practically transforming policies.
Well, I don't think it would be a question of your forming policies. It would be a question of your helping in forming policies, which I think is an important distinction to make. So we wouldn't say, tell us what we should do in area X. We'd say, we have these ideas in area X. Could you look at them and decide whether you think this will work or it's fit for purpose, or would you like us to consider a different way or a different approach to this? So it's not about, to go back to my analogy with the way some other councils are operating partnership working, it's not about offloading and telling you to do it. It's about working together and doing it.
Andy.
So many. So I won't do them all. Could I start with a relatively straightforward one for Graham, and then I'll go on to the others if that's okay. So you talk about the inflation in contracts, and I'm pretty sure I've heard you mention this before, but I just wanted to be clear in light of what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. Am I right in thinking that with contracts, for example, for emptying bins, once the contract price is agreed, there is normally an inflation-related uplift in the charge, which we would expect, and that the current discrepancy between what inflation was expected to be and our ability to raise council tax and what inflation actually is, and thus the increased charge from our contractors is a cause of some of the budget strain.
Sorry.
First of all, I thought you said it was going to be an easy one. So contracts are often different, and it depends in the nature of those contracts and where they sit across the council. So starting with maybe more traditional contracts, let's say in place and growth, the contract commonly links them to an index. It's not usually CPI or RPI, but you might have heard a terminology called Baxter Index or whatever, but there's all sorts of different industry known standards in terms of how inflation is provided for and enforced through the contract. Then maybe slightly differently and potentially more variable and more unknown is, for example, in the care market, we have to buy beds, we have to buy service provisions, and we obviously have to be very cognitive of those businesses need to survive and what that particular marketplace is, whether it's saturated or the opposite. And quite often there's annual sort of negotiations, conversations that go on. And at the heart of those is the ability to keep going. And some of these care providers obviously very small, some are multinational. So again, they're very, very different types of conversations. But certainly the CPI will have an impact on all in different ways, and sometimes it might be quite linear. For example, a Baxter Index, for example, I don't know for sure, but it'll have a component of CPI plus other types of goods and then flex accordingly. So when that's going up 10% plus, then these other indicators will be going up in that realm. And then you've got other types of provision where, of course, they have to make ends meet and have to deal with their own increasing costs of the electricity and labour, etc. But for sure, the cost of living crisis has had a very profound impact on our purchasing power, and it's pretty much across the board. There's very little that is immune from it. Obviously, as we go to any new forms of procurement, for example, in the capital programme, we obviously then join the market at the time that those prices are factored in. And even in areas where we've had profit share or management fee share, then that's been impacted by obviously footfall in terms of people can afford to pay, and of course the increased cost of the service provider with their own input costs going up. So it's as high as I can ever remember it in terms of its impact on the council, and the figure we put in, as Stephen mentioned, about £11 million. I don't remember us putting in that type of figure in previous years. I can remember as low as 3 or 4 million, maybe even lower than that. So we're struggling to work within 11 million, to be honest.
Okay, now the easy ones for Stephen. So I'm probably one of those who, won't come as a surprise to you. I think the community vision thing is a little bit high in the sky. I've got the email. I don't know if I'm guessing you're a copy on it. This is from the officer asking for, I think, contributions to the steering group, and they said they could define community power, a wide range of policies, practices, and approaches that accept the challenges of the 21st century, demand a fundamental shift in how we treat people and run public services, treat people as active citizens rather than passive service users or as individual customers, give people the power to shape the places where they live and the services they use, recognise the skills and talents within communities and their ability to identify and respond to the challenges they face, which sort of sounds very good and very nice, but it also sounds like a Doctor Street. Like a Doctor Street. And it seems to me a lot of the partnership working is looking for a way of the council offboarding things that people would normally expect an authority which functions as people want it to function and from doing its core tasks. And and to make it worse, there is a lot of talk about it, and you've mentioned community vision about 50 times, but I'm struggling to think of how this vision, how the outputs of it are going to benefit my residents, like a tangible benefit that they can feel. And the danger of, there's 150 people attending these meetings is the workload on not just our officers who could perhaps be doing their core tasks, but also on those partner organisations. And I know, for example, with the Hardship Alliance, one of the organisations I would consider a key component of the Hardship Alliance has pulled out of the Hardship Alliance. And the reason they pulled out of it is because of the workload that is that becomes an overhead for being a partner of the Borough Council. So you can, well, that's my brain done. Yeah, go on, have a go. Yeah.
Well, it certainly is a good challenge. And when I said some people think of this as pie in the sky, I must confess I was thinking of you, Andy. And skepticism is a good thing, but cynicism is not. It's kind of corrodes the soul. I think, first of all, this is not offloading, and I tried to make that clear in my presentation. I don't think I probably was successful. The model of partnership working we are seeking is not about offloading, it's about working with, not giving somebody else responsibility. So it wouldn't be a Dr. Street. It's work with the council to help make things better in your street, if we can pursue that analogy. And I do think that is different. There are some councils that have gone down the role of wholesale abdication of responsibility for certain areas and have actually passported across a budget to enable others to deliver services that the council used to deliver. We're not going to do that. That's not my way of thinking about how this would work. It's working together collaboratively. Yes, pointing to an example where a partner in the Hardship Alliance decides to pull out is a reasonable thing to do. But I think the only response I can give you is partnership working is tough. It's not easy. And it will not be to everyone's taste. We have to accept that. We're not going to be able to gauge everyone. But to be blunt, business as usual, carrying on as we are, isn't really an option. We have to think inventively about how we do things with incredibly limited financial resources of our own. Your opening question addressed, the real challenge of the moment, which is about inflation. But even if we were to imagine a situation where inflation, as some people predict, falls next year, they predicted it would fall this year. It hasn't done so very spectacularly. But even if it does fall to much more manageable levels, the financial challenges, while not of the same magnitude, will continue. They're never going to go away because we are so badly funded in terms of core support from central government. And I don't imagine that's ever going to change because we are, relatively speaking, a wealthy area. So we're never going to attract the same central government support that other areas do. So we really do have to think how we're going to maximise the effectiveness of what we do. And my belief is this is a programme for modernisation of local government. I did spend a bit of time in my presentation addressing a point that I think is a concern of yours about democratic responsibility and accountability. That's why it's so important not to go down this route of simply offloading responsibility to others and giving them a budget to spend without any real public accountability. If there's public money involved, there needs to be public accountability. So I'm firmly of the belief that the model we'll pursue here will be quite different from that pursued by some other councils that are emphasising the value of partnership. Ours will be a genuine partnership where we're working alongside others, not a partnership where we simply offload to others.
Sorry, can I just,
So, do you want to follow? I mean, we try and move the question around a bit, Andy, but you follow up from.
just I'll make stuff. And so you're talking about we can't carry on with business as usual. I think people would sort of accept that and accept the challenge. But I think the gains you're going to get from any partnership working, unless they are fairly fundamental and you are offloading a bunch of stuff, aren't going to bring us savings that the financial challenges imply are needed. And I'm still really concerned about the accountability side of it. I mean, the hardship fund, for example, the extra, I think, £250,000. I know there have been questions about, well, you know, where officers seem to be saying that they don't want how that fund is used to be made public.
I'm quite sure it will be. It is important that it is. But I think to come back to your fundamental point about, you know, what are the tangible benefits? And you did talk about, you know, the tangible benefits for people in your own ward.
Yeah.
You know, what difference will it make to them whether we have a vision that's informed by stakeholders in the community or whether we have a vision that's just the councils? I think it will make a real difference. First of all, we're bringing in the experience and expertise of people on the ground who know what they're doing and are as engaged as any councillor in their local communities and can bring a perspective that we don't necessarily have. And I think that's an important thing to have in itself. I also think you shouldn't underestimate the way in which pooling efforts, bringing together different players with different things to offer, expertise, data. I mean, the data we've got from the Hardship Alliance about where people are who need help is much more fine-grained than we had of ourselves. So that means we can really target that help to where it's needed. We can really make a difference. We can lever in money that we don't have. We can lever in expertise we don't have. We can lever in, crucially, as I've just said, data we don't have. All of these are things that could add value to somebody in your ward who's in hardship, but maybe is just somehow falling through the cracks in the system. We have a better chance of reaching those people if we can call on the expertise, experience, knowledge, and money that other partners can bring to this. So I'm much more optimistic about this than you are. I know you have your doubts, and you know, I'd love to talk to you about this in much greater length than this forum really allows.
Sure.
And I'd be very happy to do so, Andy, because I think, you know, you're raising some important challenges that I need to respond to. But in my mind, this is the right thing to do. It's going to make a real difference to the way in which the council can help those who most need help in really difficult financial circumstances.
Somebody else can have a go. I would love to carry on talking, but
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll come back. But yeah, I think we're able to give everyone a go to start. So, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask two questions, if I may, and I'd like to begin by probing the matter of inflation and the intertwined issue of cost of living. Stephen, you quoted, I think, a horrifying figure. You said that it's been estimated that inflation alone has cost this council more than £11 million. I don't want to probe further some of the financial costs to the council of inflationary pressure. Some of those have been alluded to, explained already this evening. But I would like any thoughts that you have about some of the other non-financial impacts of inflation and the cost of living crisis on this council, including, for instance, possible impacts on matters such as recruitment and the retention of staff.
You think of some examples you can give. So you want us to talk, Andrew, about the non-inflationary pressures created by the cost of living crisis. Am I understood you correctly?
Yeah, the impacts over and above cost-related, direct cost-related impact.
I mean, this isn't, I fear, quite the answer you're looking for, but clearly over and above inflation causing us to have to pay more for what we purchase, whether that's goods or services. It also helps to create demand. And so the cost of living crisis is creating demand. I can't off the top of my head remember the precise figure. Graham may be able to recall it, but to put this in context, inflation directly is costing us, we reckoned, it's cost us about £11 million, maybe more than that. But if you add inflation to rising demand for services, you're moving up into the 20s of millions of pounds. Now that is, if you like, partly at least the indirect cost of inflation. It's not wholly that. It's caused by a multiplicity of factors. Rising demand is particularly acute in children's services and adult social care. And I don't think that's directly, in many cases, related to inflation. But the cost of meeting that demand is unquestionably connected with inflation. So more home to school transport referrals at greater distance, where the providers of transport want more money for what they're doing. These are enormous ripple effects. So it's not just our direct costs in what we purchase. It generates more demand. It helps to generate more demand, which then puts further pressure on our budgets. And that rise in demand for our services, in some ways, some of it is very general across the piece, across the country. All councils are facing rising demands, particularly in children's services and adult social care. And a lot of them are facing real pressure on home to school transport bill. Here, I think we may have an added problem. We seem to have a higher proportion of SEND pupils than quite a lot of councils. So we have quite a concentration of SEND pupils, and we also have real challenges in the home to school transport budget because of patterns of development over the last 15 years. Not all our schools are in the right places, or our capacity isn't always in the right places.
So yeah, Stephen gave me a little bit of thinking time, but I don't think I've done too well, but I'll give it a go. One of the obvious areas, and I don't know the specifics, but clearly in the health and well-being arena. So mental health, particularly of adults, the stress, the strain, those falling on hard times for the first time in their life, those feeling quite ashamed to call on support, welfare support, or what have you, or because they are so ashamed not doing it and just compromising on life choices and therefore compromises on their health and well-being. So that will impact on families. And I haven't got any specifics, but for sure there will be extra demand on the council as a result, either in the immediate term, the medium term, and longer term. I'm sure it won't be dissimilar to COVID. COVID wasn't just a moment in time; it had a long tail impact to it. I suspect because some of our providers, and I wouldn't want to go into making any names or being specific, but they're working with less and less money, and therefore they have to make some compromises. So we need to be very vigilant of the standards of service and where cost efficiency measures that they are taking are manifesting on a more substantial from a more substantial position. And we have over the past, even before cost of living crisis, as when Brexit came in and the trend of challenges, we have had quite a number of supplier failures, whether it's been in construction or whether it's been in care. And service failures will, of course, have a very significant impact on us because we can't avoid and nor should we avoid our responsibility. So that is, I wouldn't for 1 minute say that it hasn't happened. I can't cite examples, but we certainly need to recognise that as a big risk. You mentioned recruitment and retention, I think most significantly in the care sector, and which is where some of the lower wages are paid. And we've had a lot of rhetoric. You would hear it on the news, and of course it would apply to this region as well. Is some care providers are choosing, say, to work in local supermarkets or have you, rather than in the care sector because of the salaries that are being paid by the particular providers. So that will be one for sure. If someone was passionate about care, but the cost of living crisis was forcing them to make different career job decisions. And I think the other one, although you said is not about the money, but the money flows back into then what do we have available to provide in terms of all of our services. So it's impossible to segment the two. If we receive less council tax, or we have to pay more for services, or where does that money come from? And it will be around choices of number and quality of services we can provide as a quantum as a council.
Thank you, Stephen and Graham. They were very helpful answers, and I think that they showed the complexity of this issue and its multifaceted impacts. And I think that's a lesson, that all of our overview and scrutiny committees, need to be constantly aware, of. If it's okay, I would like to ask a second question. This is in relation to the safety valve, which was raised earlier. I should state from the outset that the safety valve has become a standing item on the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So that's where the overview and scrutiny will primarily lie at this point, we believe. But I'd really appreciate, and I think it would be really useful to get on record some further statement about the importance of the safety valve programme for the whole council and its implications for the whole council, including financially and possibly beyond.
Yes, and thanks for asking that question, because I think it's a really important question. I just to contextualise, I've been at this council 34 years, obviously straight from an early years setting,
And I would say that
It was an input prodigy.
and I would say that my learnings in the safety valve are as profound as any other single program of work or project. So it absolutely has some real nuggets that apply to the whole of the council. And I was going to come in on this one to Andy Croy's question, but I know he had too many questions, so we had to move on. But the partnership issue is a really important thing. So this was how I was going to answer the question, and I know there's different ways to answer around partnership. So when we were faced with what's called dedicated schools grant overspend, and it goes back 3 or 4 years, maybe a little bit longer, when legislation was changed about the funding we got, and the age range moved from an adult was 18, then 25, and there was much constraints around how we could move money around the system. And ourselves, like many other local authorities, started to move to an increasing deficit. And so we're not alone. This was a national problem. And my sense of that was it's statutory, it's demand-led. Everybody else is in this pickle, or to different degrees. And what can you do? You know, is there what can be? You know, you can't go away. Is that what you just got to work within budget? Yeah, but it's statutory, and we have to admit, and it's high cost, and we have a very articulate population stating their case and winning their case in court. So we had moved to a 10 million plus deficit, and it was forecast to be in 5, 6, 7 years to be massively bigger than that, maybe 70 plus, 100 plus. And again, this isn't unusual. However, with a huge amount of effort with staffing and also I'd say political support as well, which shows is really important that at the core. So it has, so let's say we have a almost a weekly meeting, chief executive, myself, the lead member children's services, the DCS and the SEND play, all these around the table. But that's just the core, the basic core. So you need that real core commitment from the council to put all of the effort and work in and prioritise the partnerships. So often behind our difficult expenditure that's running away from us is a complex system. And that's why it keeps running away from us, because it's a complex system and it's really difficult to just go in and just stop something or change something or just reduce the invoice or whatever it is. It is hugely complex. In complex systems are partners. So in this field, schools are partners. You go, oh, well, that's easy. Local authorities and schools, that's not a big deal, is it? But then you look at the schools community. You've got academies, you've got trusts, you've got church schools, you've got free schools, you've got it just in the schools community is complex. And then within a school, of course, you've got the head teachers, you've got the board of governors, you've got the board of trusts, you've got all of that. And of course, that's not where the partnership starts and stops. You have the health have a big part to play. They actually become part of a panel that agrees the beginning of an EHCP, and so where's health in the solution and all of that. And of course, extending it beyond, it's that what are the other players in the system? Well, there's private sector suppliers who play key roles in this as well, and of course the parents. So here we have layers and layers, and I haven't covered all of them, I'm sure. Layers and layers of DfE and the government and where they come to the table and what influences and pressures they play. So you've got layers and layers of partnerships that need to be navigated and corralled around a common objective. And that common objective is a common objective that we will have increasingly become more profound across our council systems. First of all, as time goes on, our financial systems and our partnership arrangements become more complex. If you look back in the 1950s, things seem to be more straightforward. We are now players amongst big complex partnerships. So they're more prevalent, but also our need to understand them and start changing the paradigm of, yeah, we can't do anything about this, to be a critical coordinator, influencer, motivator, which, and this is multifaceted as well, but if we have the common goal and the common objective, so in the world of safety valve, as a system, we only have so much money. So how do we all play a role to make that money go as far as possible? Also in all of that is the need to get upstream of the issues. So you get there before it starts and becomes bigger and bigger and therefore more acute. And then the solutions get narrower and narrower. The more upstream, the more the art of possible. Again, partnerships play a massive role in that because they'll be more upstream than we will. So we will have more and more of these complexities and more of the absolute imperative to drive value for money. And I was extremely heartened by what looked like an impossible solution, as not only does it start to look possible, I'm not saying it's challenging, we're going to turn it around overnight, but actually already EHCPs are slightly start to tick down. It's not only possible, but it's actually a better outcome for the individual as well, because their needs and issues, maybe through an early intervention in language therapy, for example, or including being included in a certain way, stops the need escalating and becoming more profound through the system. And we know the same is in health. And with public health, it's important to get upstream of the issue, because downstream is a horrible life with highly cost interventions around acute health. So it's all of that that I think is essential for this council to learn from, buy into, and extrapolate. And it needs all of us to believe in it and champion it.
Okay, Pauline.
Thank you. I've just got three questions. The first one is really for Graham. You talk about inflation. We set a balanced budget in February, did we not?
We set a balanced budget every February.
Yeah.
Pauline,
and the assumption in that, what rate of inflation did you assume?
The rate of inflation is not a singular figure in terms of the rates. So in all of that, we will have, for example, an estimate of the pay award, an estimate of adult social care market increase, an estimate of a waste collection contract. So they're multifaceted. But when you add them all together, they came to I think it was about £11 million. It was
no, what percentage?
It was a whole different range of percentages.
So what was the average percentage?
Average percentage is, I think, it's about 7%. Might be a bit higher. Let me just. So if you got another question, I'll press.
Yeah, that's fine. So I was just reading back into the previous leader's speech at the budget setting council meeting, where he said that there was 11 million built into the budget for inflation. So it looks like that was what was the assumption going forward. So I was interested to know what percentage it is. The next question is...
sorry, 8.7.
8.7. What's your experience so far this year?
The experience this year?
Yeah.
Tough. So just taking...
So is that 11 right or not?
I think it's going to be... We are working hard to make it right, okay, but it's not overstated, that's for sure. So just taking pay award, I think we put in 4%, and when we've used calculate based on the announcements, not settled, but the announcement, we factored it through, we think we might be up to 500k, 300 to 500k shy, just for example. So it's and other areas as well. That it's going to be a tough challenge, that's for sure.
Okay. So what I was trying to understand is how much you put in the balanced budget for inflation and what the likely outcome was. And you're saying to me that it's going to be tough, but you're trying to head for 11, which is what was put in the budget.
Correct.
Okay.
There or
Thank
thereabouts. Yeah.
That was the first question. The second thing was about Stephen's comment about more overview and less scrutiny, or maybe the same amount of scrutiny and more overview. Very, very happy to hear that. And I also liked what I heard about maximum efficiency. I'm very, very pleased that you're heading in that direction. During the last year, the Conservative group have brought forward many suggestions of things where we think, with justification, that the council is going in the wrong direction, and we got very frustrated that nobody was listening. That was particularly around things like the parking charges, where we brought residents and businesses with real issues and suggestions to how we should change the proposals, and got absolutely nowhere. So I'm very, very pleased to hear that you're changing direction and proposing more overview and more listening and less, probably not less scrutiny, but the same amount of scrutiny. So thank you for that, and I look forward to it. Hopefully that might help with the latest litter bin problems.
Well, what I was going to say was I'm very prepared to listen, and I would welcome any constructive suggestions from any councillor as to what we can do to try and meet the challenges, the really very significant financial challenges. But I think it is easy to find reasons why a saving should not be made, but savings do have to be made. And I think it is necessary to live in the real world that we face really significant challenges.
I agree with you, Stephen. And I mean,
I think you're if you can play a constructive role in identifying ways in which the council can either generate income or save money, we would be very happy to hear those. I would be very happy to hear them. And I will certainly always give whatever you say a good hearing and listen carefully and respond accordingly. But you'll recognise that simply saying we shouldn't save that, we shouldn't save that, we shouldn't save that, we shouldn't save that isn't ultimately the solution. We have to find savings that we can deliver. So I think it's in that spirit. I'm very happy to listen.
Yeah,
I won't always agree with you.
I don't expect you to always agree with us, but I'm very pleased to hear that you will listen. I think with some of the parking discussions, we actually came up with some sensible solutions and some sensible suggestions, and we didn't get listened to. And I'm very interested to be given enough information about where the savings are coming from, and more information about business cases to be able to help with the process of saving money, because we're all in the same, we've all got the same interest at heart, I think.
Of course, indeed we have. As you know, Overview and Scrutiny looks at the budget as it's being formed. You will see very clearly what the proposals are. You will have your opportunity through the Overview and Scrutiny process to be able to influence things.
And it comes back.
Draw attention to any areas of danger or problems that you anticipate and see, and we will listen.
Yeah, so it comes back to the point about being able to see business cases as a holistic whole rather than individual parts.
It comes back to the point about you're having overview of the budget process as a whole.
Yeah, and the positive and negative sides of it. And the third question was a question about partnership. You've talked about a lot of different organisations. The one that worries me most at the moment, and maybe it's just because it's top of my head at the moment, is the police. And I'm particularly bothered about the amount of cost that the police could be injecting into the council as they seem to withdraw from providing the services that I think they're funded to provide. And I just wondered if anybody had a comment on that.
We have been able to, through this community vision process, engage with the police a little, but I can't say they are involved as heavily as other partners. And I take your point entirely that work needs to be done in developing the relationship with the police. And we do need to recognise that there is a lot we could gain from working more closely with them.
Thank you. I'm worried that not working with them will end up injecting more cost into the council.
I mean, just a final comment on that. It's true of all partnerships, but it does take two to tango.
Okay, Ian?
Thank you, Chair. I apologise if this appears a little low level, and if it is, and you haven't got the answers, tell me right up front, and I'll go and get the answers somewhere else. We were awarded 3.1 million for Ukrainian refugees, which we've used to buy some houses, HRA housing stock, and with the hope that once they move on, and we wish them well, that will turn over to social housing that we can use here. Two-part question. One, do you happen to know offhand how many housing units that managed to get us? That hopefully is the easy bit. The second bit is, if I remember some years ago, government came to us and said, you know, all those council houses you've got that you think you own, you don't. We're clawing back a load of money. If you want to keep them, you have to give us a substantial amount of money. I just wondered if there's a risk, bravery being what it is, whether once the refugees move on, whether there's a risk that they'll try and claw the 3.1 million back. It's just might want to be aware of it.
It's a very good point, Ian, but I think in the agreement, it is clear that these become available for the council's use insofar as you can rely on any agreement that's reached with the government. We have to take it on faith, otherwise we turn down the money. If we turn down the money, we don't get 17 new homes. We have to find other accommodation for Ukrainian refugees, and we have to remember these new homes, when they become available for general use, they don't just help ultimately people on our disgracefully long housing waiting list. They also help us deal with the really acute problem of having to pay enormous sums of money for emergency accommodation because we lack sufficient temporary accommodation. And if you lack temporary accommodation, that puts pressure on the housing list. Now, these additional houses feed through in enormous benefits, not simply for the people who will move into those houses, but in terms of long-term savings for the council. So this is, in my book, a good deal. I take your point entirely that the government can change the rules of the game at any time, but we have to proceed on the basis of what we know and what's being offered to us.
And if I can just add to, yeah, for sure, the rules of the game do change in many facets in the world of HRA, but the fundamental issue you're referencing, which cost us a mere £85 million, was what was buying ourselves out of subsidy. So the national requirement at the time for all authorities with an HRA was to pay a subsidy to the government, basically a tax on the income that we received, and ours was a startling 50% almost. So 50% pretty much of what we collected we had to hand back to the government. And then the national regime was all local authorities could buy themselves out of subsidy. So we've done that, and that can't be undone or reinforced because there is no subsidy payment now. The stock is ours legally. Subsidy is not a requirement. I think right to buy is an issue of risk as well, and how obviously as right to buy is enacted, it takes stock away from housing, so that's a risk. And that's probably, while we have an objective to increase the economies of scale and the mass of the housing stock, that makes it much more affordable, much more effective in terms of all the things Stephen described. and we need to do our best to guard against a shrinking stock. And that's probably one of our biggest risks is what that the legislation around that is.
Just as a further footnote to Graham's footnote to what I was saying, new homes, if they are genuinely new homes, are really a very great help in the HRA because they probably will have much less liability in terms of repairs and maintenance, but they still bring you in rental income. And the HRA, as you know very well, Ian, works on the basis simply it's a ring-fenced fund, but its income is rents and its outgoings are repairs and maintenance. So the more new stock you've got in the HRA, the better the balance is between your income and your expenditure.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a general question to pose to. Pauline reminded us that in the budget there was an £11 million, sorry, factored in for inflation. And you alluded that actually the pressure is more like £20 million because of the ongoing effects of suppliers' cost increase and etc., the demand, etc. So although there is that element of statement that says we budgeted for 11, so we're targeting £11 million for savings, we actually need to aim a lot higher, and we can't take our foot off the pedal in savings because of that overbearing pressure.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. It's not just a question of inflation, it's a question of demand, increased demand for services, and the two together, the double whammy, if you like, is what makes savings imperative.
Thank you.
So anyone who's not asked a question, like to ask a question? No. So if we could I know Andy had some more questions, but perhaps he could just ask his most important ones. Is that all right?
So I was just thinking, you mentioned we would have more cash coming into. I wasn't clear if it was the organisation or the borough, or that we would be somehow gaining cash from these. So could you give me some examples of where we have received cash that we would not otherwise have received, and it has come out solely as a result of this process? And secondly, could you tell me what the budget is? Because I appreciate a lot of the people turning up at the meetings, leaving the time for free. We must have a budget for this engagement company and for our officers.
I can't tell you off the top of my head, Andy, but I can try and get you the figures for that. In terms of money, I wasn't claiming that this money would necessarily all come directly to us. It will help the borough. It's about pooling resources, so it's levering in money that will help us help those who need help. So this isn't necessarily about money coming to us to spend. It's money coming into the partnership arrangements to spend. We will contribute money for which we're accountable, but others will contribute money too. So we can lever in funding, for instance, in the Hardship Alliance from things like Working United Charities, which has relatively plentiful sums of money to contribute. So these are ways in which working together can maximise the amount of resource available to help people in the borough. It's not helping the council directly in the sense that it's giving the council money to do things, but it's helping the council to be able to help those people in the borough who need help.
Almost. So what we seem to be saying then is that there is no extra money. We're just rearranging the way in which where that is money spent, because Woking United Charities, for example, was only ever going to spend that money in the borough.
And it was, but it was as a result of partnership working, identification of where the need was, that money could be levered in. So it was actually a direct result of partnership working. They wouldn't necessarily have spent that money on their own. There are some examples where we are, through partnership working, able to bring in money. Successful grant bids, for instance, they're nearly always more likely to be successful if you're working with others on them. So partnerships, incidentally, this hasn't yet been kind of fleshed out, perhaps in terms of my description of partnerships. But partnerships is not just about the council with other stakeholders in the borough. It's also about the council working with other councils. So one of the things that could also be brought into the partnership piece is the work currently we're doing through the Berkshire leaders meetings, and thinking about how we can collaboratively work together, either across the whole of Berkshire as 6 unitaries, or in arrangements between smaller collections of unitaries with a common interest on a common theme that cuts across institutional boundaries. And then we can actually lever in money from outside that will help us all. So that's another example, if you like, of partnership working, rather than simply thinking we can make a bid ourselves and get money, which we can sometimes. We maximise our chances if we're able to work with other councils, because grant givers like to see partnership working. This is part of the landscape in which we have to operate.
I appreciate the point you're making about working with other councils, and I think the LEP is a good example of that sort of thing.
The LEP will not be funded, of course, from next year.
Yeah.
So we have to think about new ways of doing this.
No more park and rides then. Sounds good. Okay. So, and you were talking about data, and I have some experience of my friends and family and personal experience of both food bank and of citizens advice, and I can't help thinking that getting the data from these guys is really, really easy. You know, providing they trust you, and the data protection requirements of individuals are covered. They've got systems and they put it on a spreadsheet and it takes 30 seconds. I'm staggered that is one of the benefits of this process, because it should be the easiest thing in the world if our officers appreciated the guys had the data. But then on the other hand, you're saying Woking United Charities didn't know where to spend their money until they got involved with the council.
What I'm trying to say is that by pooling data, you can focus attention on those who most need the help. Your point about citizens' advice, for instance, carrying a lot of really fine-grained data on where help was needed. It is sharing data requires trust, as you said. Trust requires new methods of working, where people engage with partners in a different way. And one of the challenges, I didn't mention this earlier, but it is a fundamental challenge, is getting the council's culture to change to be more receptive to working constructively with others. Because the council has in the past been used to doing so much on its own, this is a quite big cultural shift we're trying to bring about. The council has some excellent examples of really good partnership working. You, despite your skepticism about partnerships, sat on one really shining example of partnership, TLIP. That's a partnership between tenants and landlord. It really works extremely well, and it works well because on the basis of building relationships and trust. There are other areas of the council where we have superb partnership arrangements already, but there are significant areas where we don't, and there are significant areas which are rules-based, where engagement with external parties is often quite fractious and difficult. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not underestimating the challenges of all this at all. But I still believe, despite your doubts, that the rewards justify the effort.
Okay, should we wind this up now? If you've got any more questions, perhaps you could email them to Steve. So, right, Andrew's got some recommendations.
Yes. I've been listening very, very attentively to all of the discussion this evening, and I think it's usual practice at the end of an item to consider whether there are any matters that we should resolve. So I'd like to propose 3 such matters. Firstly, that the committee resolves that Stephen Conway be thanked for his leader's report, and that Stephen and Graham be thanked for their comprehensive answers to questions this evening. The second is in relation to Stephen's comments regarding the roles and opportunities for overview, for enhancing, as it were, overview. And I note that Pauline offered support for this. So we resolve that the minutes that the chairs of all overview and scrutiny committees are informed of the discussion that took place this evening regarding opportunities for increasing the role of overview. I'm sure that Neil will be able to come up with a less wordy resolution. And the third matter I'd like to suggest, following on from the answer, Graham's answer to my question about the safety valve and the importance of the safety valve, the vital importance of the safety valve for all aspects, of this council, that I would like to resolve, that we consider resolving that the council provides a members' briefing on the safety valve, so that all members of council have an opportunity to be briefed and to ask questions about the safety valve. So 3 matters. We vote for. Do we need to vote for these, Neil?
Oh, does anybody want to speak against any of them?
Pauline? Oh, sorry, Pauline?
I don't want to speak against them. I completely agree with them. I was just wondering if there's any space, or whether it's appropriate to add another one about trying to improve the partnership working specifically with the police.
Yeah.
Specifically with the police. Yeah. I think that's something that needs a bit of attention.
So,
Al,
Sorry,
could we add parish councils to that? Because you said they were very fragile, the relationship with town and parish councils.
Is it? Point. The relationship was extremely fragile when we started this process. We are engaging as extensively as we can with the Clerks Forum. We've had some dedicated sessions with town and parish councils as part of the visioning work. I now have committed to trying my best to attend to every borough parish liaison forum meeting and to report back to them and field any questions and concerns they have. And we've had some really good constructive engagement with some of the parish and town councils on a bilateral basis as well, to try and address some of the very long-lasting concerns they've had about matters in their own patch. There's been a lot of work done with some parish councils that have put themselves forward as, if you like, guinea pigs for this process, and it's been very encouraging. There will continue to be a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think that is, as distinct from the point about the police that Pauline made, I think this is a piece of work we're already fully engaged with. So I think it's in a somewhat different category to Pauline's point about the police.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Andrew?
yeah, Chair, I'd like to suggest some wording, Pauline, for the really important point, that you raised about partnership working. I would also like to suggest, Stephen, that when we're talking about partnership working, perhaps we could also emphasise the concept of synergies, as well. But that's by the way. So the wording could be along the lines that this committee resolved to offers its support for the council's goals and initiatives on strengthening partnership working. Simple as that. Sorry that I've misunderstood.
My suggestion was specifically that we need to approach the police and improve our partnership working with them.
Okay, you didn't mention that at the second time though. Okay, that was a much earlier comment.
No, I did.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so the partnership working, including with the police. Yep.
Not including with the police. I was specifically, I think it's one of the gaps in our partnership working, and I would like to see something done to improve that.
That's a fourth recommendation that that we should focus on the police.
Chair, if I may just say, I think Pauline's point is that I take it she's endorsing the approach of partnerships, but she's saying this is a gap which we need to give some attention to, and I think that's a fair point.
Is Neil happy with that?
Yeah, so are you happy with?
Perhaps you could read backwards
What
on the fourth one, or on all of them.
So it's the three that Andrew mentioned, and the fourth one is specific focus on improving partnership with the police. Yeah. Or words to that effect.
Okay, so everyone happy? Everyone happy with those four recommendations?
Quick show of hands.
Show of hands. Yeah.
It's actually that thing with changing the constitution. You've got real scrutiny about. I believe it isn't actually right to everybody, but.
Okay, so anyway, so thank you to Stephen and Graham for giving us your time.
Interesting experience.
Getting Whitney on one, lead on the next. Getting Whitney, yeah. So is that Whitney?
Okay, right, the next item on the agenda, item 19, the annual complaints report, and this is presented by Jackie Whitney, who's online, and I think we've all, it's in our packs, and I think we've all read the report, and so unless you want to give any particular details, anyway, welcome Jackie anyway.
Good evening, Chair. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I'm Jackie Whitney. I'm the strategic lead for customer change, digital and IT. We're here this evening to present some summaries of the complaints report, if that will be helpful to you. It's the first outing of the annual complaints report at Overview and Scrutiny, because previously this used to go to Audit Committee. So we used to go and present at that committee rather than this one. So hence you haven't seen it here before. So, Chair, if it's helpful, we can give you a summary of key highlights, the key points.
Okay, yeah, yes, please.
So, okay, perfect, thank you. So, bring with me this evening, complaints is within my portfolio at Wokingham, and I bring with me this evening Denise Penny. So, Denise is the Corporate Complaints Officer at Wokingham, and we've also got other colleagues on the call that can help with specifics. Just worth noting that within your packs, you'll also see data on complaints performance from children's and adults, but they obviously have their own overview and scrutiny committees. So, their performance is obviously reviewed in detail at those committees. So Dan, if I could just hand over to you then, just to run through a summary of the report. Obviously councils have it in their packs, but just some of the highlights would be helpful. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, will do. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present the last year's annual complaints report. I'll just share my screen, so I'll cover just a few slides which are included in your agenda pack. Can you all see that?
Yeah, that's good, Dan. Can see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so my presentation will be based on the first few pages of the report, which covers the key objectives of the report. This is to provide an overview of the complaints data, highlight trends, challenges, and reflect on the lessons learned. I think a brief reminder may be useful on what the council's current process is for managing corporate complaints. The council operates a 3-step formal process: stage 1, stage 2, and then signposting onto the local government and social care ombudsman. Before a complaint reaches stage 1, the council looks to resolve matters quickly and effectively. We call this early resolution, and as you will note, most complaints reach this conclusion, which benefits both the customer and officer managing the complaint. It also aligns with our customer charter, which is to be a responsive and friendly council, amongst many other things. Another thing to mention now was the change in May 2022 in how housing complaints could be managed. This change came from the Housing Ombudsman introducing a new complaint handling code and required the council to issue a stage 1 response to any complaint submitted to housing services. As you can imagine, this had a knock-on effect of increasing the number of formal complaints. This is seen on page 24, which is where I begin. Here we see a breakdown of formal complaints and a comparison to 2021-22. Last year, we saw complaints increase by 28%. That's formal complaints. The driver for this rise came from the council needing to issue more stage 1 responses, 282 stage 1s as opposed to 173 in 2021-22. It is worth pointing out, though, that totals fell at every other stage. That's stage 2. We didn't have any for the tenants panel, stage 3, but also for the Housing Ombudsman and the LGSCO. The reasons for this are complicated and many, but in a summary, to summarize the success, we could say that it was the success of housing services in implementing the Housing Ombudsman complaint handling code and meeting customer expectations at stage 1, as well as the customer excellence training provided to colleagues in 3C workshops to ensure we communicate with our customers with clarity and compassion. Turning to page 25 of your agenda pack, which I'll just scroll down, we see how complaints were distributed amongst directorates. Housing services received over half of all complaints submitted to the council, followed by children's services and place and growth. This distribution is not unfamiliar, but what is different is the larger share taken up by housing, which in the past would average at making up a third of all formal complaints submitted. Again, I think this demonstrates quite clearly the impact of the Housing Ombudsman Complaint Handling Code, well, at least its introduction in May 2022. On page 22 of the agenda pack, the report gives an overview of complaint outcomes, the challenges faced by the council, as well as learnings in how to manage complaints more effectively. So we saw progress in resolving complaints without the need for formal escalation, with over 78%, that's 746 cases of all complaints resolved early. This was 71%, 427 cases in the previous year, 2021-22. We believe the actions taken in 2022 to make it easier to submit a complaint, as well as track and monitor its progress, contributed to the continued progress seen in early resolution. A theme with many early resolution cases was that they often related to factors outside the council's immediate control: the weather, emergency utility works, and the resulting traffic diversions. These complaints were resolved by demonstrating some understanding of the situation, acknowledging the frustrations caused, and offering additional information to better manage expectations of the customer. We found that when complaints escalated to stage 1, it often related to poor service and untimely responses. Most cases at stage 2 were not upheld and centre on dissatisfaction with a decision made without fault. The observation holds true for the majority of LGSCO cases, with 6 of the 29 cases finding fault. Further still, only 1 of the Housing Ombudsman cases were upheld, and this essentially agreed with the final decision reached by Housing Services. On complaint outcomes, approximately a third were upheld, over half not upheld, and the remainder was still to be determined at the end of March 2023. Turning to page 23 of the agenda pack, the report summarises the insights over the year. It highlights again the impact of the Housing Ombudsman Complaint Code, its introduction, how media reports about a single issue can lead to exceptional service demand, how children's social care's proactive mindset in acknowledging dissatisfaction quickly was able to de-escalate issues, and how opportunities lie in assisting customers to better understand procedures and policies and thereby manage their expectations. So, to summarise, the Council did see a rise in complaints at early resolution and stage 1. This might suggest a potential decline in performance. However, such an evaluation would ignore the influence of factors lying beyond the Council's direct control. Moreover, it is essential to acknowledge the Council's efforts in 2022 towards enhancing complaint management and facilitating improved customer access to the complaints process, both of which contributed to more complaints being logged, which would indicate customer confidence in having their frustrations heard. So that's the end of the presentation, and we're open to answer any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, if I could just ask the first question, which just to pick up, apart from what is 3C, but anyway, it's probably highly technical, and we probably don't need to know. But I just want to, you just tell me what makes a complaint. What's the difference between someone reporting that the grass is too long and someone complaining that the grass is too long? Are they two separate things?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we'd consider your first example as a service request, and if that service request was not met or responded to in a timely manner or was ignored, then we would say that that's a service failure. So we haven't actually responded as we agree as the service expectations are, to respond within a timely manner and in an appropriate manner. So if that wasn't met, then that would be considered a complaint.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so can open this up to first of all, Pauline.
Thanks, that was very interesting. I'm not sure if I should already know this, but I don't. Is there a set duration for each of the complaint times, so each of the complaint types? So, you know, if it's a level 1 complaint, is there a fixed time scale? And I couldn't see anywhere in here any indication of how long you were taking to resolve complaints or escalate them to the next level compared to what that time scale might be. So I wonder if you could give us some time information.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. So early resolution, we look to resolve. Once we receive that complaint, customer relations will triage that complaint to the appropriate team, and we would look to get a response out within 5 working days. A stage 1, if that complaint proves to be dissatisfactory to the customer, they can escalate to stage 1, and then we would look. The council would look to respond to that within 15 working days, and if that stage 1 is still proving to be unsatisfactory, the customer can escalate to stage 2, and we'd look to respond within 20 working days for that stage 2 response.
Thank you. And do you?
For the majority, yes. In certain situations, there could be a time lag involved in terms of trying to tease out what exactly the customer is unhappy with. If it's just a straight, I want to escalate to stage 2 without actually an explanation as to why they remain unhappy with the stage 1, then we'll go back with them and try and understand why they want to escalate. What essentially are they unhappy with regarding the stage 1. A lot of it, that's the complicated bit, because we really want to get to grips with why they remain dissatisfied and to make sure that we do answer every aspect of their complaint at stage 2. So that can drag out a bit, but for the most of stage 2s, we do get them out on time.
It's an interesting point though that you've raised, Pauline. It's not detailed in the report, so we'll take that away and we'll make sure that the next report that comes back to overview and scrutiny, you can actually see performance against the SLAs.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you. A couple of questions, if I may. Well, firstly, one observation. I note on one of the pages, I think page 27 in the documents pack, there's a very interesting graphic about customer compliments. Okay, and it does contain some very useful, encouraging words. But I think in the interests of balance, but also equally, as a way of presenting information, helping us to better understand the nature of some of the complaints, I wonder whether we should also include in future reports some a similar sort of diagram showing some of the comments about the complaints, because that could be very revealing as well. Okay, so 2 questions, if I may. Firstly, is there any benchmarking available that might illuminate Wokingham's performance against similar local authorities?
We have done benchmarking in the past. What we found is the most useful metric to use would be the results from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. Their annual review gives a summary of their findings and results for each council. So that's because we're comparing oranges with oranges there in terms of rather than, because we've tried to do it in the past and we find that different councils have different timeframes regarding when they respond, and sometimes some don't even offer a stage 2. They go just straight signpost into the ombudsman from the stage 1. So we've used the annual LGSEO results for the council to base our this benchmarking for. So yes, certainly we will be planning to do that when the annual review letter comes out.
Thank you. And my second question, there's references to 3 C's, including 3 C values, written guidance and training workshops. It's obviously such an important matter, but it's one that I'm sure needs continual refreshing and reminders. So my question is there any scope, if it's not happening already, for this to be part of the induction of all employees within the council, and so any scope for including it as part of the employee appraisal process?
Yeah, so Chair, we've been talking to the Learning and Development team about making the 3 C's part of the induction process. Just for clarity for everyone, the 3 C's is a training programme based on our responses, not just to complaints, but it's about the way we communicate as a whole. And the C's stand for care, clarity and confidence. So we are communicating with care, so we're demonstrating empathy. Clarity, meaning we're clear and we're accurate, no jargon, straightforward language that everybody understands. And then confidence. So confidence in the way that we're talking to people and we're communicating. So we know what we're talking about. We're giving them reassurance. We're giving them confidence. It's sessions that we've been running across the organisation with different teams. Some teams are running tailored sessions for as well. We've also got a team of 6 dedicated quality assurance assessors. So they are scattered across the directorates. and they can quality assess and provide support to people, not just writing complaints, but writing any communication out to our residents and customers. So yeah, so we're in discussions with Learning and Development about getting this in as part of the induction, and we're continuing to roll this programme of work out.
Thanks for that, Jackie.
Okay, Alison?
My question follows on from that. So you said 122 colleagues have completed the workshops. I just wanted to understand more about what proportion of the officers who need, you know, to have the full 3 Cs training have had it so far.
That's great. That's a great question, Alison. So we are working with, we're targeting. So wherever we've got pockets where we see of dissatisfaction, what we're doing is using the quality assessors to check the responses. Because, for example, if you see some complaints that have been responded to at stage 1, the first formal stage, if a customer wants to escalate to stage 2, we are doing spot checks to see whether it's maybe the fact that we haven't been clear, or we haven't managed expectations, or we've used jargon and that sort of stuff. So we are absolutely targeting where that training may be. To give you a specific percentage, I can find out for you, don't have that off the top of my head, but just to let you know and reassure you that what we're doing with the quality assessors is actually targeting those areas and making sure that those areas are focused on. I think, for example, we've got some teams in place and growth where we're delivering some direct training that's tailored to their needs in the coming weeks. So,
Andy?
Thank you. Thank you both for the presentation and your comments. I think sometimes it's a bit of a joke, isn't it? The councillors go last. I always get to say, all my questions have already been answered, and then they retreat again. But genuinely, many of my questions have been sort of addressed, but I won't let that stop me. So first of all, this is a bugbear of mine. I think we may have mentioned it before, is residents versus customers. So a customer has a choice about where they can go, who they pay the council tax to, who collects their bins, etc., and residents don't. And I think residents should have a higher level of a service than a customer who can always go to the next shop or the next bank or whatever. And I just feel very uncomfortable when I see our residents referred to as customers. Thank you for the explanation of 3 Cs. The irony of it about the clarity, and it's obviously such an important part of what the guys are trying to do, the guys, and I mean that in the unisex sense, are trying to do. Again, perhaps that's a graphic just to explain what 3 Cs is, because it does seem to be at the core of everything for future reports. And again, sort of following on from what Pauline was saying about the duration of each complaint, or how long it spends in each part of the process. There's 2 questions there. Is that timeliness, or that time spent, is that currently subject to any sort of internal review? Because I'm guessing you have internal reports you look at to monitor the progress of complaints. So is the duration of each complaint and the amount of time it spends in each stage, is that subject to current management internal review? And so that's my first question, I guess. And the second question is, a few times it's mentioned that if that customers can escalate. What happens if they don't? I guess it just gets closed off at that stage. Is that correct? So there's just 2 questions there at the end.
okay, Dan, do you want to take those, or I don't mind taking them?
I can. So in terms of internal review regarding how long we do, as customer relations, I'm part of the customer relations team, and we're responsible for managing receipt of complaints, as well as making sure they're triaged to the appropriate team. Our team will chase up teams to make sure that the team, those responsible for issuing the stage 1, are aware of the timeframes involved, and we'll chase them up for if the response is being issued on time. Similarly, we're responsible for issuing the stage 2 responses, and we have weekly meetings to check where we are, in terms of getting those stage 2 responses out on time. And if they're not, we will make sure that we engage with the customer to advise them that additional time is required, and in that instance, customers are satisfied with that approach. Sorry, I forgot the second. In terms of complaints being closed, if a customer does not escalate, then the assumption is that they are satisfied with the response, and we leave it open for them to come back with beyond. Even we're quite generous in the time frames we give them to come back to us. Usually we ask them, if they're not happy with the stage 1, to escalate within a month, but we're quite generous in leaving that open for some period of time. But we're also conscious that the Ombudsman, if they decide to eventually go to the Ombudsman will only really look at complaints within 12 months, and that 12-month period is from when the council received the complaint to begin with. So there is should we say, we give clear signposting and guidance to the resident or customer to make sure that they are aware of timeframes involved, but we will assume that after a few months that the case is, if they're not escalating, that the case can be closed.
Just to add to that as well, what we also do is after each complaint is handled, and if the customer hasn't come back after a certain amount of time, we send out a feedback survey to them. So some of you may be aware, we have what we call GovMetric, which is our feedback mechanism, and we have a specific survey around complaints. Obviously, if they're dissatisfied, it's not about the complaint as such, it's about how we've handled as an organisation the complaint. So again, some of that will also include things like timeliness. So we always send one of those out to customer. It's optional to complete, obviously, but we always send those out to customers following a complaint. And to date, on average, the feedback that comes through is good. So whilst they weren't happy to begin with, in terms of how we've dealt with their complaint in the main, they are happy.
Thank you very much. Then another very, very small one that is not related is that I noticed that you're reporting complaints by email and post as one category. And I was just wondering, I appreciate that what they have in common is they're not the web form, but I would have thought the people who are complaining by post are very different to those complaining by email. And is it just because there's one graphic and not enough space, or I was just wondering why you're lumping them together?
I'll be absolutely open, and I'll say it's lack of space. But we receive very few by post, but it's something that I will consider and review in terms of differentiating that, because I think it, as you suggest, Councillor, it does indicate a different kind of complainant who's sending it by post. But if I could say that I think most complaints are going to be by email and then the web form. But
okay, could just clear up Andy's point about customers and residents. A resident's just one type of customer in the world of customer relations and whatever. Is that how you see it?
I think the term, and I know we've spoken about this before, but I think the terminology around customer is about the service aspect. So it is a debate that we had as well when we were talking to focus groups of residents around the customer strategy that it's currently out for formal consultation. So and it was unclear. The residents that we spoke to, some said they didn't like customer, and some said actually they didn't mind because it had that service element, even though when you talk about customer, it is about choice. I understand that it is about the service element. But I think what will really give us an insight, so we absolutely take your feedback on board. So thank you for that this evening. The customer strategy is out for formal consultation at the moment. So when that formal consultation comes back in, because it's based on the word customer, and obviously the strategy, I think we will get a lot of insight and feedback on that, and obviously we will change it as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Norman.
Thank you. My question really was around the way that the information is presented, especially on page 24, 25. It's all presented in percentages. I think it might be more helpful if it was presented in numbers of cases rather than percentages, especially trying to compare one year to the other. We've got the formal complaints going up by 28%. Below the table on page 24, the number of stage 1 complaints increased by 109, bracket 63%. I'm not sure what that number means, and so on. So if I'm trying to look at the effect, for example, of the introduction of the Housing Complaint Handling Code, how does that affect the number of cases in the different categories between last year and this year? We've got the total number of cases on page 24 in the two diagrams, but then on page 25, we've only got 22, 23, and it's percentages rather than numbers by each directorate. So it's just a suggestion. It might be more meaningful to give numbers rather than percentages. Thanks.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Take that on board. Thank you.
Anyone else who hasn't asked a question? Oh, Chris.
So actually, echoing Norman's observation there, actually, it was just another topic I was going to hit as well, 24, 25, and compare it with page 30 and 31. When you put the numbers in the pie charts or the donuts, for want of a better word, they make more sense. When it's percentages, it's much harder to visualize what's actually going on. Another item would be, I've got to get this right, page 30. We've heard earlier on about the efforts that are being expended for school transport and how financially challenging it's become. And I see there's only one complaint for school transport. So that would indicate to me that that department's doing pretty good under quite strenuous circumstances. So I'm quite pleased to see that. And then the actual question that I want to throw at you is, you mentioned the timescales for each level of stage that you go through with the various complaints. And I'd like to put an observation in. When dealing with highways, if you send an email in, you're expecting a response within 5 days. And that email response will then say you will be dealt with within 28 working days. Now, when that doesn't occur, we've now got to go through the process again of raising a complaint, putting it in. So actually, from issue commencement, i.e. we sent an email in and now we don't get a response, to the time when you can actually get up to stage 1, it's quite a lot longer than you actually cater for yourselves. Is that taken into consideration at all in your timeframes?
It absolutely would be. So if you have somebody who has already asked us for a service and we have not delivered that service for whatever reason that may be, and they have stipulated that they've already been waiting 28 days, then what we wouldn't do is say, well, okay, well, you've got another 15 working or 20 working days on top of that to wait for us to respond now. We would absolutely get onto that and refer that. We'd obviously triage it. So it comes in, if it comes in the online form, triage it, and then that will get directly referenced to the service to deal with. So in answer to your question, we would absolutely take that into consideration, yes.
Thank you very much for the answer. And I would add to that experience is from the earlier years, the early reporting years, 2022. It has improved because my neighbours have shown the improvement to me. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Could I just jump in on the observation about school transport, because I've actually sat on a number of school transport appeals. I think there must be more than one, but do they go through a completely different route and so don't come to you at all? Is that why that number's so low?
That's correct, Chair. Any appeals, they go through, they're outside the jurisdiction of the complaints process. They go through an appeals process, so we don't record that as a complaint.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? No. So Andrew's got some recommendations he's noted down here.
Yeah. Before I suggest possible resolutions, recommendations, because the matter of reporting numbers versus percentages was raised, and page 20, one of the tables in page 24 was specifically mentioned. The table reporting is compared to previous quarter. The figures in that table clearly are raw figures, okay? And the narrative then takes those raw figures and does the percentage calculations. But it is a complex table, and I think that we sometimes need guidance in helping to get to grips, with such data. Okay, so areas of possible recommendations and resolutions. The first is that relates to the matter of reporting responses and time targets and actual performance. So, the first one has to be thank you to Danit and to Jackie for their presentations. I do apologise, okay, for not beginning with that. Secondly, that this committee would support the inclusion of data in the next annual report regarding response times and resolution times and targets and actual performance. Okay, and I think Jackie, you said that that would be quite possible. The second matter is one that Andy has raised and that Jackie has addressed, but I think it is such an important matter that we might wish to consider it as a resolution on this one as well, and that's that we support further review, that the council continues to review its use of the term customer and explores possible alternative terms when the customer excellence strategy is scrutinised. Andy, have I captured sort of the essence of that or not? Yep. Okay, and the third area was not raised, okay, but I think might be worthy of consideration, is that overview and scrutiny committees be provided early sight of any significant updates to the complaints policy. And again, this ties in very much, with comments earlier this evening about, the important role of overview and in helping to feed into the development of policy. So four recommendations stroke resolutions. Pauline?
The resolution about customer versus resident, I don't want to get tied up on this too much because I'm pretty sure that the people out there who pay the bills are more interested in how good their services are than what we call them. However, I think the word customer, although I get what Andy's saying about they don't have much choice, I think it changes the way people think about them internally, potentially. So I would be a little concerned if that recommendation said we think we should be changing that term. I don't mind us trying to find a term that is better. That's fine. But I wouldn't like too much time spent on this because I think it'd be better spent on improving services. But secondly, I think the mindset of people is different for customer rather than resident.
I don't think Andrew recommended we were going to change just that it should be reviewed. I think
review it in the context of review it in the context of the development of the customer, the ongoing development of the customer excellence strategy. So.
Sorry, I didn't raise this earlier, but I'd just like to say that I didn't think the equality monitoring data really added anything to the report for us, because it's only about people who complained online, and as we've been told, most people complain by email, and it only tells us about English first language, disability and age. So I think if we're going to have equality monitoring, we need to see a bit more information.
Fair point. Thank you. I'll take that back.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew.
Chair, if I could respond to that, because I absolutely share your concerns there, Alison. I think that the equalities monitoring data is a little bit thin, and perhaps we could add a further, resolution, asking officers to explore opportunities, meaningful opportunities, for adding a little bit more granularity to that, more detail. Yep. Is that okay, Neil?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Solutions.
Right. Are we all happy with those 5 resolutions? So quick show of hands. Okay, well,
I do apologise, Chair. There was one observation I just want to make on page 26 about is English your first language. It actually says in there that the data is based on the 2011 census and not actually on the response from the complainants. Is that true? Am I misreading that?
No, that's the should we say the breakdown of the equality data is what we have seen taken from the 2011 census in terms of the distribution, the number of people who said that English was their first language, the age breakdown, etc. We haven't taken it. We have taken it directly from our database on complaints and those who completed those questions, not from the census.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so well, thank Jackie and Denise for coming and presenting this item to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, right, the next agenda item, the bus enhanced partnership plan and scheme. So introduced, we've got Paul Fishwick, who's the executive member, and Rebecca Brooks, the officer who knows all about buses. And I think we have George as well on this. Yes. So Paul's going to start us off. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick introduction from me, because I know Rebecca's got all the detail. So in March 2021, the government published the National Bus Strategy, and this required all local transport authorities in England outside of London to publish a local bus service improvement plan known as the BSIP. Wokingham Borough Council's second BSIP was published on the 27th of January 2023. We are also required to agree an enhanced partnership. This is in 2 parts, the enhanced partnership plan and the enhanced partnership scheme, as shown in the additional documents in your agenda. This is a legal agreement between the Borough Council and the local bus operators to work together to improve services. The Borough Council has recently been awarded £400,000 for 23-24. However, to enable the council to receive the full funding will be dependent on publishing an enhanced partnership. It is also understood that a similar funding value is anticipated during 2024-25, subject to having the enhanced partnership. The creation of this document has required hard work from staff at the Borough Council, together with input from local bus operators, and agree with its contents. And my thanks go out to everyone involved in drafting this important enhanced partnership plan and scheme. The next stage of the process is to consult key organisations as set out in the timetable at the bottom of pages 35 and 37. There are governance arrangements for the enhanced partnership to oversee the scheme, and its members and voting rights are set out on pages 36 and 37 and page 45 of the enhanced partnership scheme. The enhanced partnership is set out in part 1 of the additional documents, pages 3 to 25, and part 2 covers the enhanced partnership scheme, pages 26 to 51. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Paul, I think, yeah, we need to translate that into our agenda pack page numbering, I think. But
I've gone off the public document.
all right, sorry, yes, we have got page numbers. Sorry, yes, yeah. Sorry, my mistake.
So I was hoping they'd be the same.
Okay, so yeah, so we'll use the numbers on the plan rather than the agenda pack numbers for clarity, so we all know what we're talking about. Right. Okay. So should we go straight to questions, or does Rebecca want to say anything? No.
To be honest, I think Paul's covered most of it. I think the only other thing to add might be that in the initial funding round, we weren't successful in getting funding. So the document you have in front of you is what we would term a shell agreement. So it has more of headings, if you like, which we can add detail to at later date via a variation, rather than putting in a lot of detail at this point in time.
Okay, thanks. So first off, Caroline.
Thank you. On page 45, you talk about the voting rights. How come the voting rights are just the bus operators, but we don't have voting rights for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? I'm sure there's a very simple reason, but I thought it was people who use the bus. It'd be nice. Page 45, sorry. Look at voting rights. Got the bus operators, councillors, but then we go down and no voting rights. So I just why the difference? Thank you.
That's simply because that's the way an enhanced partnership for local bus operators is written in the legislation, and that's mainly because it's the bus operators who will incur cost from the measures that go in, the same way as it is from the local authority who will incur the cost. So it is the local authority and the bus operators who have the voting rights within an enhanced partnership agreement.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Paul and Rebecca. I think this is a really, really interesting document, and the fact that the enhanced partnership is a legal partnership agreement, I think, is also really important. Okay, in lots and lots of different ways, so I was very interested, to see this. It's what you've presented to us here, I think, is very, very comprehensive. It provides lots and lots of food for thought, including sort of the future, what the future might hold. For instance, I noticed references to demand responsive transport. I won't pursue that, tonight, but I think that's a really interesting issue. I'm glad to see that it was there. I do the governance arrangements Caroline was talking about a moment ago. Again, I think that they're set out very, very clearly, indeed, and giving a wide range of stakeholders a voice, if not always voting rights. I do have one recommendation for two suggestions for resolutions and recommendations when questions finish.
Okay. Pauline.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Rebecca. This is very good. Is this the actual legal agreement? The one thing I couldn't find in there, and I may just have missed it, was any sort of exit clause. And I'm always a bit worried about contracts without any way of getting out of them other than force majeure. Is there an exit clause I've missed, or is there?
There is one in there. Yes, because I know we've spoken about it previously, so it's definitely in there. It's under revoking. Just to see if I can find the right section for you.
Page 89.
Sorry, is it 89? But yes, there is you can revoke it. There's two ways of doing it. You either go through the legislative process of revoking, or you can do it through the variation clause. The variation clause will allow it to be taken to a forum, and then you can vote on it as majority vote. So if there's a situation where both operators and the local authority agree it's the best way to move forward, then it can be done.
It's not quite the same as an exit clause. Maybe I've misunderstood it, Rebecca, so please apologies if I have. But does this mean the other parties have got to agree before one party leaves, or from one party just leave?
No, you do have to agree.
So it isn't really an exit clause. I'm not sure what the rules are behind BSIPs, but I've got this sort of nervous tick every time I see a contract that doesn't have a way of getting out of it, apart from when everybody else agrees with you. Because generally the reason you want to get out of it is when people don't agree with you. I just wondered if there's a way, if there's anything could be added that would provide a better escape clause than being locked in.
It would have to be a balanced exit clause. If we did try and put something additional in, we can certainly discuss that. But it has to be equal on both sides, and it has to be agreed usually. The whole point of the way the legislation works for an EP is that everything has to be agreed, or the operators have to have a say. Likewise, the local authority has to have a say on it.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think all parties would probably want an exit clause of some sort in there, and I understand that you don't want people leaving just on a whim, but I think, you know, being able to leave without everybody agreeing would probably be a good idea for all the parties.
But my understanding, it's tied up in the legislation, and this is how it has to be written out, as shown on page 88.
But could we check?
That's what it says, page 88, 5.59.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I'd just be happy if somebody checked. Just a bit worried about contracts that you can't escape from.
I can certainly take that away and have a look back at the legislation.
Norman?
I suppose almost the opposite of what Pauline was asking. If there are new bus operators appear, how would they fare in all of this? Could we bring them into this partnership later?
Yes, all bus operators would automatically be part of the partnership if they start operating registered services within our area, unless they're excluded under the exclusions. So, for example, if it's a community transport operator, or if less than 10% of the mileage is registered route, then they wouldn't be included. But anybody registering a route with the Traffic Commissioner in our borough would, to all intents and purposes, be part of the partnership automatically. That is part of the legislative requirements as well.
And what would they end up with by way of voting rights, for example, then?
It depends on the level of the mileage registered. It depends what proportion of the mileage they have against the overall mileage operated by operators within the borough. So if it's less than 20%, then they could have one vote. If it's over 50%, which at the minute Reading Transport with Reading buses and Thames Valley buses are in this category, then they would have 2 votes. But really, if it's over 50%, you're only ever going to have one operator with over 50% of the mileage. So it would only likely to be 1 vote.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Alison. Sorry, I missed you last time.
Thank you. I refer to the opportunities on page 52, which mentions that the hospital shuttle park and ride bus with the potential to be developed into a local bus service. So currently there's a shuttle bus going for staff to the Royal Berkshire Hospital from Thames Valley Park. Does that have the potential to be developed very, very soon for our residents to be able to travel on that bus? And if there's far more people on the bus, staff and patients and visitors, it could be a more frequent service. And I am confident our residents would be very keen to have a way to get directly to the hospital, back to their car. And we'd get a lot more use out of a park and ride that we've really not been able to use at all since it was built.
Well, that's a really good point, because actually we've not long opened it up for members of the public. We were hampered by the works on the London Road, which meant the service reduced. It's not actually our service, it's paid for by the Royal Berkshire Hospital, but it is open for residents to use, and the concessionary pass is accepted on it. Obviously the hospital, we work quite closely with them in partnership, and anything we can do to support each other to make that service better for our residents and better for the hospital, then we will look to do that.
How's that been communicated to our residents? Because I'm not sure, looking around to Early and Woodley councillors, that we know that our residents have got a great service available to them.
Well, we're just about to put that out in the Traffic and Travel News. It wasn't the right time to be promoting a service that was only operating at peaks when the works were in place on London Road, because it was suffering some quite significant delays. So it's only a fairly recent development, but we are now looking to promote that now it's up and running.
Okay, can I ask another question about park and rides? So Mere Oak's operating at about 40%. What is the plan to be able to boost usage of it? And could a community bus service to Royal Berkshire Hospital be run from there? Or perhaps to Twyford Station? Because with the Elizabeth line, our residents are quite keen to use Twyford Station, but it's very, very difficult to access by bus.
Possibly. I think we'd have to look at a feasibility study to see what usage potentially there is and what sort of costs there are. Yeah, I sort of came here to talk about the enhanced partnership, so I hadn't really prepared for that one.
Okay, Catherine.
I've got 3 questions. They're all very local. Is that all right? Page 23, the top item about the key corridors. Definition of the key corridors. I just wondered whether it was significant that you'd left Swallowfield and Risley out of the A33 corridor. Whether this was, you were going to stop sending buses to Risley.
There's no plan to stop sending buses to Risley at the moment.
I would put Risley in because it is the end point there.
Yes, I think Swallowfield and Risley come under the rural and low density areas under the southern parishes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, I know Swallowfield and Risley are even less density. I mean, much less than Spencer's Wood. My next question was page 52. Yes. Yeah, bus priority facilities. I know this isn't an omission of yours, but I know that the Beak Avenue bus gate is being talked about. I talked to Paul about it the other day, And I think Shinfield Parish Council are also making noises about reinstating, I mean, not that it ever existed, because it's still under development, but reinstating the plan for a bus gate in Shinfield Village Centre on Beak Avenue.
We're gonna. I'm discussing.
Well, we're on bus
Chris Easton
priority
at the moment.
Bus priority facilities.
Yeah,
it's a bus gate. But the missing bus gate. I know it is missing out of the plan at the moment.
Yeah, I'm in discussions with officers at the moment about that one.
Yeah. Well, I will mention it at any available opportunity. And page 56. Again, this is like my first comment that the 600 isn't mentioned. Is that because of the date at the top, perhaps? You don't mention the 600, but that only came in last year. Is that it? It says 31st of October 2021, and the 600 is more recent. Yeah, okay. Sorry, didn't notice that. Okay, thanks.
Ian?
Awesome. Thanks, Chair. Just a quick clarification on that, if I may. Page 53 talks about real-time passenger information. You've got B15, B16 there, ratepayers halls. Yeah, is that California ratepayers hall as in near California Crossroads, Finchampstead?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and Andy?
Thank you, Chair. I've got four quite.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got four quite disparate questions. I don't know if you want me to do them one at a time or reel them off. So just following on from what Alison was saying about the park and ride, is it going from Broken Brow? So it's actually going to be a park and ride as well. It's not just the residents can access the bus. The park side of it will be available as well. Is that correct? That's my first question. And then
people can still park there and pay the fee if they want to walk along, for example, along the River Thames.
Okay. But will there be park? What I'm asking is, will there be park and ride tickets? You know, normally when you go when you go to a park and ride, yeah, for the bus.
For the bus, yes, to go onto the bus to go to the hospital.
Yes. Okay. So proper park and ride service.
It's a park and ride bus service that will go to the hospital.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, in no particular order. So the document talks about a bus stop audit, and then in one of the appendixes, I think it lists a certain number of bus stops which are controlled by, or where Woking Borough has responsibility for maintaining them. But I wasn't sure if the reference to all bus stops in the borough just referred to those maintained by Woking Borough, or also referred to those maintained by the various town and parish councils. And maybe this is some of that partnership working that Stephen was talking about is about to come to fruition here. So just some clarity on that, whether all bus stops means just borough bus stops or literally all bus stops. And then the next question is the officer's summary, the preamble to the document says that we failed to receive funding in the BSIP funding. Was that failure because we did not have an enhanced partnership, or was the failure totally not related? Okay, you've answered that with your head. I can see that. And then finally, the last question is the enhanced partnership allows for us to use new technology. It's very vague and says we can do what we want. But it also says that one of the objectives is to try and reduce the impact of roadworks. Now, and I hate it when people do this, try micro suggestions, but I've got a micro suggestion. Is there such a thing as like a device which changes the flow of traffic lights at roadworks to give buses priority, you know, as you have in some lanes, so that if a bus pulls up into a traffic jam and those lights have got this sensor on, because you're working in our borough and you're doing us what we say, then those lights would go green for any queue of traffic with the bus in, which might go some way towards mitigating the impact of roadworks.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? I'm not aware that that technology actually exists on permanent traffic lights. Yes, on temporary ones,
No,
I
it doesn't.
don't think so.
It doesn't.
Well, yeah, okay, so you've answered that one. So the bus stop, so outstanding is the bus stop audit then, that's the only one.
The bus stop audit, yeah. That would be an audit of all bus stops in the borough, regardless of who owns or maintains them. Then that audit could be shared with the towns and parish councils, and we could discuss which ones would need improving.
Okay, Norman?
Thank you. On page 7 of the report, it says that the plan overall has no end date, and Scheme 1 will run for 5 years. And then on page 24 at 111.2 talks about the funding that the borough council's putting in, which is over the next 3 years. So what happens beyond those 3 years? We've got 2 years of the Scheme 1, and then a sort of forever plan. What happens if the borough council changes its view about funding one way or another, putting a massive amount more in, a lot less in, circumstances change? What would happen after the 3 years?
That would be something to be discussed at forum. I don't really know what. I don't think there's a commitment.
And just really, you know, what is by having these figures in this plan, effectively, what is the commitment, I suppose, beyond 3 years in terms of funding?
Well, there's no commitment beyond the 3 years in terms of the funding that's said there. I think that's a case of going back to forum and discussing where we go from there. It is in relation to the services that are provided and the maintenance that's already undertaken.
Okay. Andrew?
Yeah, can I just add a supplementary question to what I think is a really important point that Norman's raised? And I guess the concern, is that this is a legal partnership agreement that will be enacted through the forum, as I understand it, based on voting rights in that forum. And I guess what Norman is suggesting, and if I've understood this correctly, I think it's a very important concern. Are we potentially locking ourselves into something down the line that could have significant financial implications for the council? Yeah.
Can I just ask Norman again? Did he mean on page 38 the funding that's shown in year 1, year 2, and then not applicable year 3? Because that's grant money from government, and that's the loss of grant money if we don't have an enhanced partnership.
No, it was more around, it was on page 24 of the report, page 64 of the agenda, and the top paragraph describes the funding that Woking Borough Council is providing, 870,000 of financial support, etc. So it was around that, and it spells out what our intentions are over the first 3 years. So my point really was, okay, fine. What happens at the end of those 3 years? Because we've got a scheme that's running for 5 years and a plan that potentially runs forever.
That's the background to the plan of what we're spending at the moment. That doesn't commit us to spending that amount in the future.
No.
It would be the services that we're running that would go to forum for discussion. However, any vote that's taken by the forum would then be subject to the council's constitution and the approval processes which accompany it. So anything would have to go to IMD if that's the right route, or to executive for a decision. So it cannot be forced through in that sense by the operators if we can't afford to run those services.
Okay, Chris.
It's just a general question about the plan. Some of the data that's in here is a little bit dated, 18 months or more. I'm not sure whether all the data is of that sort of era, but without being accused of predetermination, with the risk of Royal Berkshire Hospital being resited, how quick can this plan adapt to the requirement for changing bus services in those circumstances?
There would be a forum meeting every 6 months, which has to be held as part of the agreement and the scheme. So at that point you can change it, but any member of the forum can call a meeting, and you can have one at any point in time. So if you need to change it, you can. But you've also got to bear in mind that you've got a 70-day traffic commissioner registration process, which has to align with it. So 6 monthly meetings would probably be suitable for that anyway, because you don't tend to put on a bus service tomorrow. You do. It does take some planning.
Yeah, I quite agree. It does take planning. It's just to make sure that the planning alignment between the building works and the other infrastructures that are going to be put in place.
But in that particular case, Chris, would be working with the hospital, for example, and knowing what their program is, and then aligning it with that.
Thanks for the answer.
Norman?
Yeah, sorry, just coming back on the funding arrangements. Rebecca, you said, you know, that it would be subject to the delegated authorities within the council going to executive, for example. I can't see that spelled out in this document. Surely somewhere it needs to say how Woking Borough Council would make its decisions about funding. Just even if it's just a couple of sentences, surely it needs to go in there somewhere. Just so that this partnership doesn't feel it's got the right to impose anything on the Borough Council. I think that would be a wise thing to include.
Yeah. Okay, we can certainly firm that up. The area I was referring to was 5.2, so maybe we need to add something to 5.2 in specifically in relation to funding them.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And Pauline?
I'm going from the sublime to the ridiculous on page 48. I've just noticed a typo, Wapkingham. So you might want to change that as well.
Will do, thank you.
And Alison?
Just looking at page 10, the key plans and strategies that this aligns with, and it refers to the Economic Development Strategy 2016 to 2021. Since it's now 2023, I just wondered if that was correct, or do we not have a strategy that is forward-looking?
That was correct at the time of the first draft and at the time of the original BSIP, which is where the plan has to meet the BSIP, but we can look to update that before we legally make it, yes.
Okay, and just one question from me, if I could. I was looking at on page 56, the routes and vehicles, and there's a column with cashless. Is there a commitment to enable people to purchase tickets with cash on the buses, or is this included in the plan, or would it be possible people with cash are going to be excluded?
No, it's simply saying which buses on the 31st of October 2021, which was the date when the original BSIP had to be made, which ones were cashless and which ones were not. Obviously, the aim is to offer both cash and a cashless option. So cashless option might be a mobile phone or a debit card. So it gives people more choice in the way that they want to pay.
Okay, thanks. So I'll pass over to Andrew, who's got some recommendations here, he's noted.
Okay, so 3, possibly 4 recommendations, resolutions. The first is that this committee expresses its thanks to Paul and to Rebecca for their presentation and answers to questions this evening, and to all the many other officers who must have been involved in the production of BSIP and the enhanced partnership. Second recommendation, that an annual report on the performance of the Bus Enhanced Partnership and Scheme be presented to an appropriate overview and scrutiny committee. This annual report might just it might be really rather brief, just an update, but I think it's important enough for it to go to an appropriate overview and scrutiny committee. In response to Pauline's comments about exit clauses, options, and I think that Rebecca has said that that it's possible to consider officers to further explore the legislation with respect to exit clause options, with a view to possibilities for strengthening these. Pauline, are you happy with something along those lines? Okay, and the final possible recommendation, resolution, it may have been covered in the previous one. I'm not sure what other people think, but possibly in section 5.2 that we request that officers add a more detailed statement about how WBC is able to maintain control over its financial commitments to this partnership. Norman, this was the point you raised. Are you happy with something along those lines if Neil is able to put it into better words?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so
the recommendations.
Are we happy with the recommendations? Can we have a show of hands?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So thank Rebecca, and Paul, and George for coming to speak to us, and Chris, who's online as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right, okay, item 21, the current executive and IEMD forward programme.
Through page.
Right, yeah, starting on, the first page is already gone, so I don't think we can't really consider that. So we have to start on page 104. That's the
Yeah, and apologies if I'd missed it, but there was a commitment to bring a decision over the emptying of litter bins to an executive in the future, and I can't see it on here, and I'm just wondering which executive it's coming to, or an IEMD. I don't know which it is, but
I suspect this was published 7 days ago, wasn't it? So it's probably inside or outside the envelope when they
So
realised.
maybe my question then is, could we find it and insert it in the right place, and could I be told when it is?
We can find out and get back to you.
Yeah, I noticed that the autism strategy is coming to exec on 28th of September. This is something that's been an outstanding item for HOSC for a very long time. So it looks like it's going to the executive before it be looked at by HOSC, which I'm concerned about.
Was it not looked at by HOSC a few months ago? Because I've certainly seen the presentation.
I understood there was problems with the lead being ill, or there's been a delay.
I've certainly seen it in one overview scrutiny, so I just can't remember which one. Within the last 8 months.
Well,
okay.
If you look at the HOSC outstanding, which is enormous.
We can check and confirm the autism item at HOSC.
Autism strategy is currently unscheduled. There's very little on the programme, an enormous list of. I would just like to overview Scrutiny Management Committee to recommend that HOSC consider this before it goes to the executive on 28th September.
Yeah. And I would thoroughly support that, as well. I can't find when the next HOSC meeting is, but I think the sequence that you describe, is actually very important. So I would totally agree.
Okay, we'll just be fed into the HOSC program. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just for information, the Climate Review and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting earlier this week, we agreed we would put the solar farm on as a permanent issue.
Just going, yeah, let's go back to pay. Sorry.
It's kind of jumping ahead.
All right, the solar farm. All right, solar farm's on page 105.
Yeah. Yeah. But he was jumping ahead, so it's going to be on climate emergency.
Right, sorry, Norman.
So mine's on page 106, the first item, the promotion of Woking Borough Council assets. I'm not sure what that one's about and whether we would be interested in having something on that with scrutiny.
So I can find out and then discuss it with the chair and vice chair. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So where is it? Right, 107. And 108.
Not a question on 108, it's a question on the process. I recall probably about 9 months ago, we had a discussion about these forward programmes not being sent out to members. And they used to be sent out regularly. The last one I can find that was sent out to members was in September 22. It's fine if you're a member of Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, but if you're not, I think I recall there was something in the Constitution that said it would be sent out monthly to members. That stopped happening when Anne Hunter left. It then started happening in 2022 for a couple of months, and I'm not sure it's happening again.
I seem to remember getting an email regularly about.
Yeah, the last one I can find is September 22. Maybe it's gone missing in my email, but I'm not sure I've seen one recently.
I think you're right, Pauline. We used to get a weekly notification of meetings that would direct us to all of the committees and so forth, and from there we could get
We also used to get a monthly forward programme of exec decisions, and it used to arrive at the end of each month, and I don't think I've seen one since September 22, and it stopped happening before after Anne left. It then started again after we complained about it, and I'm not sure it's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll find out.
Yeah. Sorry, but in this instance, it's not simply a question of finding out. I think we've expressed a view, that we feel this would be worthwhile, reinstating.
Apologies if I've missed it.
I think it's a requirement in the Constitution.
Okay.
So I've just checked my emails, and the last one I had was on the 23rd of September 2022.
Yeah.
Okay, Catherine?
This might be a sort of newbie question, but why we've got 3 forward plans for overview and scrutiny committees. We've got health, children's, and community and corporate. But we haven't got.
You jumping the gun, I think. Oh, we haven't got there yet.
Got some others.
We haven't got there yet.
Well, okay. Well, it was kind of an overview, if you like.
But, sorry, Chris, say something.
Yes, just a comment on the topic about notifications. We do need a lead time for notifications because we are enabled as members to place questions on the committees for the topics that are being discussed. So if we don't get forward notification for committees that we're not on, then we can't pose the questions and help direct the programme.
Yeah, so a very good point to me. Ian.
Without quickly looking at the diary, is it right that there is no executive meeting in November? That's quite a gap between October and January. I just wondered if something slipped there.
I haven't got my.
Again, I'll check and confirm.
We'll check and confirm that. So, sorry, now agenda item 20. Oh, sorry. Callum, sorry.
Couldn't be with you in person tonight. I've managed to catch something horrible. Just to go back on the query about the November executive, there is one. It's on the 30th of November. It might just be that at the moment there are no items scheduled for that specific meeting, but I'm sure it will be utilised as we move closer towards it. In terms of, there were a couple of queries earlier about notifications regarding getting the executive forward programme. You should be getting that automatically every time one's published, so we'll definitely have a look into that. Can members confirm, are they receiving the notification when we publish the individual executive forward programme? Because I'm certainly getting them when I publish them.
I'm receiving those, yeah.
Yeah, I received those as well.
You receive those, but not the executive one. Okay, that's useful to know. So we'll go back and note that. Thank you, members.
Yeah, just to say that forward plan for the executive and individuals are available on the website. So if you go to wokingham.gov.uk/council and meetings, there's a tab there which says forward plans for executive. If you click on that.
I know you can look for it, but I think it's a requirement of the Constitution that it's sent out.
It's being published, isn't it?
To repeat myself, I
published.
think it's a requirement that it's actually sent out.
Okay.
No, that's not the same. You have to know to look.
Okay, can we move on? Yeah, because you know, I'm sure it's just an IT problem. Right, item 22. Overview and scrutiny work programs. So, oh, sorry. So we've got draft work program. Oh,
The general observation.
sorry, Catherine, you had a.
I was observing that there are some overview and scrutiny committees here, but not all of them.
To clarify, there were 4 included. The Climate Emergency Scrutiny Committee met last week and it agreed that it received the annual update and it's going to use that to develop its work programme. So it'll be here from next meeting onwards, if the chair's happy with that.
That's exactly what we agreed in the meeting.
Right, okay. So looking at page 118. 119, 120, 121, 122, 123, 124, 125, 126. Chris?
Sorry, yeah, 123. What date in March?
I think that is published somewhere, so.
To be confirmed.
I'm sure it's in the corporate calendar.
It is.
Right, okay, 126, 127, 128, 129, 130, 131, 132, 133, 134, 135. Andrew.
Yeah, Chair, my attention is drawn to the first bullet point under currently unscheduled topics for HOSC and autism strategy. So, you know, I think the point that was made earlier is really, really timely, very important. So,
could I just add, I'm a little bit concerned that, you know, the unscheduled topics list is being added to each time, and these are not being scheduled.
Again, I'll pass that on to the scrutiny officer and to the chair.
Okay. So one thing, right.
Last page. So any comments at all about the appendix, please? Explain how.
Just to explain Annex B, these are the items that were submitted by residents and town and parish councils earlier in the year. So I've just gone through and some of them are service issues, some of them are more scrutiny issues. So I've just gone through and tried to allocate each one to a relevant location and are therefore comment.
Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Neil, for the work that you've done on that. I don't have any concerns at all, you know, about the way in which you have allocated these individual items. I do, however, perhaps after we finish dealing with Appendix B, want to suggest some additional items for overview and scrutiny.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, I was just wondering why item 7 relating to Laurel Park is referred to officers rather than to scrutiny committee.
I think these are Neil's suggestions. I think it's for this committee to make a decision.
Yeah, can I make a comment on that? Because I think there are lots of reasons, why this is a very this concern, raised by residents, deserves very full, and thorough treatment. I would like to suggest that the very specific questions that have been raised under item 7, it is probably appropriate that and possible for them to be discussed with the sports and leisure team. However, and I think this is a very important however, we do have a sports pitch strategy that is currently under development. I believe that is due for completion during the summer, and one of the areas of overview and scrutiny that I was going to suggest was that we get an early sight of the sports pitch strategy, which would also, I think, add to understanding of some of the concerns that are raised here under item 7. It would provide an opportunity, to bring in witnesses, as we saw appropriate, including potentially, from the club, that presented this item. So that would be my proposal. Yeah.
Sorry, Andy?
Yeah, sorry, Carl, I think that's probably the best way of dealing with it, rather than looking at one individual issue to look at the overall strategy. Could it perhaps be reflected in the comment against 7 if members agree, so that it doesn't look like we're just booting it off into the long astroturf, and that we are going to look at when I'm good. So and that we're not just doing what we're doing with it. Yeah, and I think that's a good plan. But again, my heart sort of sank a bit when you said they're finishing the strategy, and then it's now we're thinking about a scrutiny of the strategy. Are we going to be able to influence the strategy in a good way? We're looking at this slate. That's I don't expect people to answer it, but it is. We are supposed to be trying to add value, aren't we, in advance, rather than.
If we move on to agenda item 23, then, which is our forward programme, isn't it? So
before we. So.
Oh.
So I noticed that we talked earlier about the fragility of the relationship between the Borough Council and our town and parish councils, and 11, 12, and 13 are all suggestions from them. And number 13 simply says refer to place and growth. Alberfield Parish Council have asked us to scrutinise for things, and it just says refer to officers. If we're serious about deepening and showing the value our relationship with the town and parish councils, I don't quite know why that couldn't have some of the things that they mentioned, there's service and facilities in the garrison. It would come into the thing we are going to be looking at about estate facilities that we're reviewing again. So in some ways, the reference could be to this is already being looked at, this has already been looked at, this is programmed, and just to demonstrate that we do value these contributions, because sometimes we don't get very much come in.
I think that sounds very sound to me. Sorry, Andrew?
Yeah. I think you made a really important point Alison, and I'm just wondering whether it would be much clearer if instead of next to item 11, for example, saying C4 and 6 above, we restate, in the case of 6, refer to community and corporate overview and scrutiny and so forth. Yeah. And if we did that for items 11, 12 and 13, as appropriate, to show that these will be looked at by the appropriate overview and scrutiny committees, because I think that's what you're getting at, and I think it's very important.
Sorry, Andy.
Sorry, can I just say, I mean, working down them, so it's 11, the delivery of agreed infrastructure. We had a task and finish group which looked at that 3 years ago. So the idea we would look at it again and discover something new just seems a bit silly to me. The same is probably true of I thought we'd sent that one off. Oh, okay, well then. Perhaps you shouldn't be looking at it because we have looked at it. We had a task and finish group on estate infrastructure. Oh, so I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the parishes. I'm looking at page 140. That's where we are, isn't it?
I'm so sorry, Chair. So I was just saying that on the 11th of September, this committee, we are looking at the progress of the adoption of estate infrastructure since the task and finish group in 2020. So that's an excellent example of being able to say, yes, we are looking at this. It's on our timetable. And all tribute to Andy, who chaired the task and finish group in 2020. Yes, well, I did force you to chair.
And then I think, I don't know if these are, for 12 and 11, so 12 and 13, I don't know if these are the actual contributions from the parishes, because from this, I'm not even sure if I'd give them to officers, because where it says waste collections, what is the scrutiny object of that? Or litter, yeah, but you can't just have litter. You know what I mean? I don't know if it's a poor quality. I don't know if we have summarised it to one word, or if it's actually like 5 paragraphs. I mean, it's just a poor quality submission. I don't know.
Aren't these topics that we should integrate into the appropriate scrutiny, because they're all over the place, aren't they? Really? So I mean, they should be.
Chair, perhaps if we get a one-liner in, we should go back to them and ask for some clarification about what exactly is it that you need us to scrutinise. I mean, yeah, but we shouldn't be guessing. We should be addressing the exact issue that's an issue in Arborfield and Newland. Please, sorry, Chair. We shouldn't be looking at issues that only affect one parish. It's got to be an issue that is borough-wide.
Okay, Ian.
Yeah, I'll be even pickier than that actually, because at 13 it talks about services and facilities in Arborfield Garrison strategic development location. There is no such animal. It's the Arborfield strategic development location. The garrison is separate and is actually an enclave. The red line that makes up the garrison, makes up the development location, does not include the garrison. In fact, the garrison is the garrison and the Arborfield SDL is the Arborfield SDL. They are two separate things.
Okay, Chris.
Was it the garrison?
Well, they're wrong. Arborfield Green.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
Go, Chris.
Garrison is different.
Chris. Sorry.
Thank you. So my observation would be that several of these items are referred back to the Community and Corporate O&S Committee. So that's me chairing that. And I look at some of the items in here and they're a bit dated. Item 4, for argument's sake, the new Shinfield supermarket, ground's been broken. The Shinfield new cricket pitch, that's open. There are other items in here. So I would like to have a reference back to these, because I mentioned some of this, these requests are a bit dated, is to see what are still relevant, because I don't want committees' times to be eaten up with items that have already been dealt with.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah, I did mention that I'd like to suggest some other items, additional items for consideration. So if it's okay, I'd like to list them. The first is the matter of recruitment and retention of staff, which we touched upon briefly, I think, in our last overview of Scrutiny Management Committee. It is something which we are looking at very, very closely in children's services, but I believe that it would be worthy, particularly after the discussion in that last meeting, of getting an update and a very thorough sort of deep dive into matters relating to recruitment and retention, of staff. And it would seem to me that Overview and Scrutiny Management might be the appropriate committee to do that. We can talk about sort of when, at another time.
Might need to be a part two.
It could well be, yeah. Would there be any objections to the chair and I working with?
No, I think that's an excellent idea. At the recent HOSC meeting, we were all very pleased to learn that they only have a 10% shortage of fill posts.
Yeah,
which might not sound great, but it's actually very good for recent years.
Yeah.
So obviously there's something they're doing well in adult services, and is that being shared?
Yeah. But certainly when I think it was Louise, who spoke with us at the last meeting, she raised quite a number of, issues that I think it would be worth probing council-wide. Yeah. So the second area that I thought of is in relation to the council's investment portfolios. I won't go into details at the moment. It would, from my understanding, if this was considered to be sort of a matter worthy of scrutiny, then I would imagine perhaps community and corporate, or possibly the audit committee, I don't know, would be the appropriate routes.
Yeah, I think it's the audit committee, and I think it probably already does it. At least it did when I was on it.
Okay. Could we perhaps check that? Yep. And if we're happy, that it's being done regularly, do we have someone on the audit committee at the moment here? Okay, that's fine.
I just checked. Does the audit? I'm not even sure if we can give work to the audit committee. No, just checking. Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that, but if we can just be reassured, that this is on there, it's covered off. Yeah. I think following on from the beginnings that we've made with Thames Water, and there's still a long way, to go with that. I would like to suggest also, given the problems that we've had with Scottish and Southern electricity networks, who are responsible for cabling in the borough, I would like to suggest that if we can secure witnesses, representatives senior enough from SSEN, to appear before the committee, that we pursue that as well. I'm being very specific in suggesting that we don't pursue this until we are assured that we will be able to secure people who have influence and can carry things forward, and that might be possible quite relatively soon, or it may be something that proves to be quite a challenge. But SSEN, I think that, again, if we're able to do this, overview and scrutiny management, would be possibly the appropriate committee, and it would tie in, with some of the experience that we're developing now, with with Thames Water.
Chris?
Yeah, if I just bring to your attention, there's a standing requirement now within climate emergency for report on the solar farm, which will bring into that topic into the conversation. So I don't know if we need to duplicate it.
Yeah, it's a lot more multifaceted, I think, than that. But I take your point. Totally take your point. But it's a bit more than that. And then the fourth and final area that we talked about earlier is if it's possible for us to have some early sight, of the sports pitch strategy. I take Andy's point, about it only, if we are able to have some meaningful input, into the strategy.
Would that be us or corporate?
I assume they're just going to publish a draft, aren't they? So I assume that can be scrutinised. Yeah, yeah.
So community and corporate.
Everybody happy with those proposals? We want to
Is everyone happy with these with the proposals we've made?
I know this is really late to mention it, but when we spoke to Thames Water, and I raised the subject that we're all supposed to be working to reduce our water consumption, and I questioned what is the council doing to reduce its own water consumption? Do we have any data on that? Any more information? Which I'm not quite sure made it to the minutes actually. It does say councils had a part to play, which I think I said a bit more than that, because I did ask whether the council's own use of water was something that came into our climate emergency strategy. I asked this during the meeting. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay, we get some more information.
If
on
we
that
could get,
feedback.
yeah. Thank you.
Right. Oh, but the action tracker still. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I want to retract my comment earlier. We found the climate emergency overview and scrutiny committee on page 127.
All right.
Yeah, if I can just ask, at the last meeting, the topic about grass cutting was brought up. Alison asked for see if we could get some information being fed in, and it came to corporate, and I haven't seen it included. So can I suggest that at the moment for an October task for the community and corporate overview, that we reflect on the year's grass cutting saga?
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yes.
I know it's after the.
It's your committee. You decide what goes onto the agenda. It's up to you.
I'll add it then, please.
Yeah, can I just say we had grass again a few years ago, and we looked at what went wrong then. And second, and again, it seems to me what's happened this year is you have two very extreme sort of weather events, and there's no contract in the world is going to survive those. I really wouldn't waste the whole committee. If people must do it as a task and finish. If people are really obsessed about it, put them in a room together and let them talk about it. But a whole committee on it. It's up to you. It's your committee. That's my advice, because then I don't know if other people remember.
I do understand and appreciate exactly what you're saying. Yes, it is what a lot of people would consider to be a minor item, but I can't go back on making a promise at the committee last time that I would take it on board. So I will, even if it's just a couple of line report of what the statement is and what the effects were this year, just so that we've got it on record that, yeah, we had problems and these are what they were.
But my recollection was the other thing that we promised a couple of years ago, that we'd actually set out clearly for residents which areas of grass were going to be cut and which ones weren't, and what the expectations were. And I don't know whether we've ever done that clearly.
If I may, that actually the email that comes out telling us what their programme is quite clear.
No, that tells you I'm going to cut early next Thursday. It doesn't say I'm going to cut the bit at the end of Rye Hill Road, but Rye Hill Way, but I'm not going to cut the edges because there's orchids or whatever there is. I think a lot of the problem with grass cutting is that the residents do not understand when things are going to be cut and what is going to be cut and what isn't going to be cut.
I think this just reminds us that residents don't use the public question ability of all our committees. That if they put a question in, as chair, you read out an answer that the officers provide, but the officers have to go away and research and have a reasonable explanation. So rather than having something on the agenda, it could be responded to it in that way.
Andy?
Two things really. What one is it, perhaps, Chris, for your meeting, it could be framed in the sense of following up on the commitments that are made out of this last contract review, and because there are things they said they were going to do and they haven't done. And so it's more of a broader thing rather than just looking at why a couple of months were rubbish. And then the other thing is in terms of answering questions, I would say that I don't think it's our job I don't certainly think it's my job as a scrutiny committee chair to answer for the actions of the council. My job as a committee chair is to scrutinise the council. So if a resident comes and asks me a question, I will give them my answer, not the officer's answer. I think all chairs should keep that in mind. But only if I've not got an opinion. You know, I mean, but people, you're right. No, if people ask me, if they want to ask me about the climate emergency plan, I'll say, you need to ask the executive member because she's the one responsible. If you want to know what I think about it, I'll tell you. But the actual plan is Sarah's biscuit.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I'd like to support what Pauline was saying about her recollection that there may have been a commitment given by this council to develop a strategy that would clearly set out which areas would be mown, which would be which verges would be maintained as wildflower unmown areas and so forth, and setting out how this would be communicated effectively to the residents and so forth. I think it would be really useful if you did take this to community and corporate to ask that question: what has the council done to progress this specific and very important issue? If there was a previous commitment given.
I may then I'll talk to Callum and we'll word a question to go into it for the officers to answer for us.
Sorry, I wasn't even on the thing.
State of the Green Redeem scheme, I think you can probably take that out because it's been cancelled.
Okay, is that that's it. Before 10:30. Excellent. Sorry, I should have been stricter.
Thank you, Callum.
Thanks, Callum. Yep.